right, welcome to the Monday, June 6, 2020 Board of Directors meeting for MSAD 51. Thank you everybody for being here. It's a beautiful night. Appreciate you joining us. First item for action is recognition, and I'd like to welcome Representative Steve Moriarty to the podium to introduce our first item of recognition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening to all members of the school board and to the superintendent. I'm here to present two legislative sentiments, the first of which actually was done by Senator Breen, and at the time was presented to the recipient, but there was no public presentation before the board. And so I took the liberty of drafting a letter to Coach Jason Curry in recognition of the debate team state championship. And I'll present him with a letter tonight and read it to you so that you all understand the feelings and the recognition that I extend tonight. It is with great personal pride that I congratulate the Greeley High School debate team on winning the Maine Forensic Association State Championship for congressional-style debate. I understand the team members Mia Netland, Meredith Brubaker, and Ruth Weeks will compete in the National Catholic Forensic League's National Finals in Washington, D.C. over the Memorial Day weekend. Obviously, that's taken place already. My letter is dated May 17, so I probably should have updated it. In addition, team member Nat Thompson will represent Maine in the National Speech and Debate Association Finals in Louisville, Kentucky in mid-June, and that is to take place next week. Finally, Coach Curry, congratulations to you for 24 years of successful coaching of the speech and debate program here at Greeley High. Well done on the occasion of your retirement as president of the Maine Forensic Association and your recognition as Coach of the Year for 2022. So I extend my personal best wishes to all members involved in the program, and by extension the towns or the districts as well. It's an excellent program, and you've done, Coach, a phenomenal job. Congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
The second presentation tonight is an actual legislative sentiment in the typical binding and format. And we honor tonight Coach Hash on his retirement as coach of the Greeley volleyball team. So it reads as follows. State of Maine, be it known that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, join in recognizing Kelvin Hash, who is retiring as the Greeley High School volleyball coach. Mr. Hash started the program from scratch in 2001, and in its first varsity season in 2002, the team reached the state championship game. The team won 7 straight state championships from 2003 to 2009 and set a state record for consecutive match victories at 66. In his career, Coach Hash coached his team to 253 match victories and 10 state titles. We extend our congratulations and best wishes, and be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 130th Legislature and the people of the state of Maine. This sentiment is signed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and once again I extend my personal congratulations to the coach and to his many successful teams over his 20-year tenure as coach. So congratulations, job well done, Coach.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. And Mr. Moriarty, thank you. when I first started coaching, there was always this parent that showed up, and he didn't have a kid playing. I thought it was kind of funny, and it was Mr. Moriarty. Had to come, he liked volleyball, so it was kind of cool. And then we developed the parents that are sitting in the front here of past kids that would always come back and watch during the preceding seasons. So it was quite nice. I don't know.
Thank you so much for all you've done. You were, I don't know if you remember this, but you were my woodshop teacher, and you provided a safe place for me in high school, and I can only imagine what you've done for over all these years as coach. So I'm so glad we were able to recognize you tonight. Thank you for being here. I know it was a long drive, so we're so glad to celebrate you and all your accomplishments. Thank you. Okay, moving on to more of the business items for this evening. We will first move into the approval of minutes. Looking for a motion for April 25th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
I'm abstaining.
And abstaining, thank you. And a motion for May 2nd,
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Also abstaining.
Okay, thank you. Mike and Ann abstain, thank you.
Wait, no, I was there. I approved.
Okay, Mike approves.
Sorry.
He was present.
He was here.
And then the motion for May 19th.
So moved.
And
Second.
thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. So we have two items under public comment this evening. One is for general public comment that's not related to some of the presentations that we have following. So we'd like to open up the podium for general public comment if anyone would like to speak. And the lights are really bright. I don't know if there's a way to adjust those because I can barely see anything in front of us.
Yeah.
So if I'm not giving you a nice looking face, that's why. All right, seeing no, okay, come on up.
Good evening, and congrats to the award recipients tonight. My name is Tim Valenti on Fieldstone Drive, North Yarmouth, and I'm running for school board. I'm here to talk about the proposed DEI policy currently under review. My feedback isn't part of some party platform or based on something I heard on a podcast or book club, but from 12 years of working with equity policies and missions in schools. Let my career serve as proof that you can fight discrimination and foster safe learning environments while challenging this brand of equity. I'm not against equity, as evidenced by my push for a more equitable COVID and masking policy for our special ed and under-resourced community. It's about fairness, giving differentiated supports to individuals based on their unique needs, and who disagrees with that? And I think the current policy is well-intended, but it's vague in places, so people are filling in the gaps, and that is hurting public buy-in. Some fear that creating diverse and equitable environments means we have to exclude certain members of overrepresented groups. They see inequality when language is used and actions are supported that wouldn't be if you switched the identity, race, gender, and political party. Fighting discrimination with discrimination is still discrimination, so affirm equity, but also equality. Policies require consistency and good faith to get people to follow them. Next, please detail how the superintendent will evaluate our progress. Will the measures be based on opportunity or outcomes, or both? In my experience, if outcomes, and you look at everything through an identity group lens, then every disparity will appear discriminatory, even if it's not a statistical or natural reality. You'll risk drawing false conclusions that won't benefit the student or cause you're trying to address. The only answer is to evaluate each student and disparity as unique without a predetermined agenda. That's where you find unbiased answers to inform productive, equitable solutions that close performance gaps. You wish to prepare our students for a global and multicultural society, and yet universally state that students have been impacted by biases and inequities. I learned quickly in my work that there's no universal anything. Culture and context for student performance is completely different in Chicago, Tulsa, Atlanta, New York, and now Cumberland. If I worked with students as if they experienced all the same inequities, systemic failures, I'd fail to meet their needs. I'm not saying that color blindness is the answer, as ethnicity, identity, and culture are relevant to supporting students, but modeling relationship building is how you prepare them for global world, because it shows them to experience diversity through engagement, not blanket assumptions. Draft a policy that recognizes student challenges, but create belonging by celebrating growth and perseverance. We do not humanize students by reminding them why they should fail. We do it by reminding them why they can achieve. Make a policy that makes it clear we support a growth mindset. That's what the research says, and that's what I would do. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this moment? Okay.
Good evening. Jason Curry, Greeley High School, MSAD 51 Education Association. First of all, I'll give you an update on the debate team. We went to Washington, D.C. for the national finals of the NCFLs, and darn it, none of our kids made it past the preliminary round. However, there is consolation in that of our 3 debaters who attended and participated in preliminaries, 2 of them recognized a large host of the competitors who'd been in their initial preliminary chambers in the very final round. So our kids from the very beginning of the tournament were up against the toughest competition that there was available across the country, not just softballing the chambers that they were in. They were up against the toughest from the start. They got eliminated at the start, but Ruth Weeks will be back next year with a thirst for vengeance. To speak from the Education Association lens and also from my own personal perspective regarding the Equity Committee. First of all, I'd like to say that we, as a school district, do a great job. Our high school has been ranked #1 by U.S. News and World Report. Our middle school immediately following that, congratulations Mari, was ranked #1 in the state as well. And that attracts some of the very best candidates for administrative positions, for teaching positions, for ed tech positions, guidance, and all other positions that we could advertise for. I was fortunate enough to be selected for one of the committees that selected an administrator for my building here. And one of the very best candidates started out with their explanation of why they chose Greeley by saying, it's very nice that you're first in the state in high school and in middle school. But what brought me here was the fact that you don't rest on that. You go above and beyond to improve, like with your equity committee. I'm a recent addition to the equity committee, and I have to say it's been an incredibly rewarding experience. I find every minute valuable. Lawrence Alexander, our consultant, the other members from our staff, from the school board, from the community, every one of these individuals is coming into this experience with a passion and a desire to improve our school district, and enough knowledge and enough reflection to navigate how to get there. I wholeheartedly endorse the work of our equity committee and am proud to serve on it. I can't claim responsibility for anything we've done because I've only been in for a month or 2, but I'm very proud of the work that's been done. I'm very proud of the work we're continuing to do, and I think we should all be proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you. You should give yourself more credit because you've attended both of our equity events, and I think you joined in October, so it's been more months than that. All right, is there any other public comment this evening not related to our upcoming presentations? Okay, thank you. So we'll move into communications. I will pass this off to Peter Bingham for board chair and vice chair nominations.
One of the tasks of a outgoing board member, which was assigned to me, is to interview each one of the other 9 members, but really specifically the 6 that are remaining, to get some kind of an interest in serving for officers for the 22-23 year. And again, I had discussions with each of the 6 and also the remaining board members. We initially had 2 individuals that were interested in the vice chairmanship. One of them, it was a provision if somebody was chairman and the individual chose not to be chairman. So I will be nominating on the 22nd Tom as vice chairman. And similarly, I interviewed again. We initially had 2 individuals that were interested in being chair, and during the last week, one of the individuals indicated that that they were no longer interested due to time commitments. So on the 22nd, I will be placing in a nomination Jason Record as potential chairman, and that's my report.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for taking on sometimes not a very easy task. That can be a hard one, so thank you. Next in communications, so just so the public is aware, we will be voting on those nominations on the 22nd, which is our next regular meeting. Next in communications, we have the draft board calendar. Jeff, did you want to mention anything about that?
Nope, just to say that the calendar matches pretty much the current calendar for this year. I don't think there's a lot of deviation from it. The new board orientation, we don't set that until the new board members are on and we know what their schedules are. So usually it takes place sometime in July is when we've been doing that. First meeting of the new board will be July 18th, and then there's a retreat for the board on August 15th, which is what we did last year. And there's a couple of off-cycle meetings that are held on days other than Mondays because of holiday weeks. First being the 8th of September, which is a Thursday. But other than that, the schedule follows pretty much what we have followed this year. I don't think there's any other exceptions that I see. So
Okay.
just want to let you know. And then there's some of the things that are more larger events or ones that we've already tentatively booked. We've put those on for you. Of course, these are all tentative for the most part, and they can certainly change, but most of them, some of them are statutory.
So one thing I just wanted to mention, because I think it was to our benefit this year, is that we included some joint meetings with our towns. And I think there was some interest based off of my time that I meet with the town chairs that of having a summer meeting with new board members and new town officials. And I think those meetings benefit us all and just continue to build relationships. So I think that they should become part of this kind of board meeting so that we can make sure we don't miss those in the future. And then the only other comment I was going to make is around the budget timeline, and with hope that there would be some changes to that statute to allow us to line up differently, but that takes some work.
Yes, and Representative Moriarty, I think, is, oh, there he still is.
I met with,
Yes, he knows about it.
I
He
met
knows
with him.
about it.
He's waiting for my follow-up.
Yes.
The only other mention, or thing I would like to mention during communications is that on Tuesday, we all get the opportunity to vote. And if you have not done that yet, we encourage everybody to exercise their right and vote. Anyone else from the board have anything to share for communications? Go ahead, Peter.
Just a note that obviously the chair was there yesterday handing out diplomas, and Jason and I were at the graduation, and I just want to compliment Jeff, the high school administration, for just and everybody else that participated, just a wonderful, uplifting thing, and I just, came away from that feeling so good, and hopefully we may not have the weather every year, but that venue is just so good. So thank you, everybody. It was a wonderful experience. I started going to these things in 1984, and this was just very uplifting. And thank you for everybody.
It was a beautiful day, and I believe it's only the second outdoor graduation that's happened, so I hope that that continues. I hope that's the tradition from now on. It's a beautiful spot to be able to hold that ceremony.
I will say, historically, the Greeley Institute, there used to be outdoor graduations
Okay.
regularly
Okay.
back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, but that stopped. The SAD, this is the second time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything further for communications from anyone? Okay, so we will move into presentations, and first welcome Kim McDonald.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing the proposal to Quebec in the fall. I believe you have the copy of the field trip request. So it is an annual event that has been put on hold for a few years, and we are very excited to bring our seniors to Quebec for an immersion and cultural and historical weekend. Moving it from the springtime that has been typically where the trip has been placed in the year to perhaps the fall. We're looking at, I think it's looking at Veterans Day weekend in November. It might fall well with sports, and and it's also a fun time of year to beautiful time of year to visit Quebec. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have regarding the proposal. The draft itinerary is very much like what we've done in the past, working with Jump Street Educational Tours. They provide the transportation, the lodging. We work with them to find suitable lodging, and then the different events. And the events are chosen for the time of year that we go. So some of the events may not be as lively or pertinent in the fall as they are in midwinter. But we're looking at what we can do to have this experience be as culturally rich as possible. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have regarding the proposal.
Great. Would anyone like to ask any questions? Go ahead,
I
Anne.
had one question, just regarding the estimated cost of the trip per student of $470. I can't remember from previous years. Is there an opportunity for any sort of scholarship for students who aren't able to pay the full price?
We have not set up a scholarship. That is something that I'm very eager to set up, and I'm not really sure how to go about setting up an official scholarship for these travel experiences, but I think it's something that's needed. We wanted to get this approved and get the information out to the students before summer, so that they also have time to put some money away over the summer. And I often will try to work with parents in any way possible for fundraising. But I would like to establish a scholarship. If anybody knows how to set that up, and also to make it sustainable funding. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but it is something I'm very interested in, not only establishing for Quebec, but also for the French exchange programs.
Thank you. Avery.
Yeah, does the price change depending on how many students plan on attending?
It does change somewhat. So that's what we're looking, that is based on the majority of the seniors who are currently in, or who are the rising seniors, hoping that they will all enroll in the trip. Typically, I would say 90 to 95% of the seniors do participate in the trip. And we also have parents who participate, and that actually, the larger the group, the less that it will cost. So perhaps it could even be a little bit lower than that. There have been increases in costs, though. Fuel is definitely going to be increasing costs for travel if it stays at these rates. But this is the approximate cost that I just received in May. So hopefully the fuel costs won't make it go up any farther. And that is for a 3-night stay. Just wanted to be clear. We were looking to perhaps, you know, how much would it cost for a 4th night if it were Veterans Day weekend, and if we could leave on a Thursday afternoon and come back Sunday. It may be cost prohibitive to add just one more night for the hours that we would be there. So I think we'll probably keep it at three nights.
Great. So I see 38 students here. Is that the number of next year's seniors that are enrolled in French classes?
Yes, I'm as accurately as I found on May 17th.
Great.
Yep.
And the term self-funded by participants, does this include parents and chaperones, or will their costs be passed on to the students?
No, the chaperones, I think it's a required, I don't know what the ratio is actually with Jump Street. It could be an 8-to-1 ratio where so that would mean maybe 4 chaperones are paid through the funding of the students paying for that. And the parents, though additional parents going, would not be. They would have to pay the $470.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Kevin?
Ms. McDonald, I'm just glad that you're back here doing this again. It's been
I'm glad to be back.
far too many
And we
years.
made it back safely from the exchange, and thank you all very much for your support.
did.
I hope you enjoyed the Pande piece. Were you able to share, get those? Have you gotten them yet? You haven't? The box of like gingerbread? Oh, okay, well then I've just spoiled this prize.
all check with
They're
our children.
coming along. So, but thank you for all supporting these trips.
Yeah, it's just far too convenient to be up in Quebec, and I'm glad that you do this, and the feedback from students and certainly chaperones that have gone in the past. It's just such a favorable experience, so thanks for your work.
Thank you.
So, does anyone have any other questions? What we'd like to do is move the first item for action up so that we can approve this, or at least vote on this trip request. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving down through our presentations, we will now welcome Susie Robbins and Mari Trebilcock on a bullying presentation. Jeff, do you want to give any background to this before Mari, or maybe that's where you start?
Yep, I'll just introduce it real quickly. A few months ago, I had mentioned that we would be working on a presentation on bullying in our district before the end of the school year, and I asked Susie Robbins if she would coordinate that. And Mari Trebilcock jumped in and is really presenting tonight the presentation, providing more information on bullying in general and some information about bullying in our district. So we're getting back to you after talking about this probably 3 months ago, that this presentation will be coming.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you to the board for inviting us to share how bullying and harassment are handled in our schools. While I'm presenting for you tonight, other building administrators did participate in crafting the presentation that you'll see this evening. There are times when I'll be speaking for everyone, and times when I'm speaking for myself, and how I approach things tailored to the middle level student. I'll do my best to be clear by using we and I to differentiate between those things. And if you have questions that are specific to another level, I do not claim to understand the kindergartner, so I'll invite my colleagues to respond. So why are we talking about bullying now? The board has expressed a desire to understand how bullying incidents are handled in our schools. Parents are seeking understanding on how bullying is managed in the schools. What is our process for dealing with it? And so tonight, we hope to explain what bullying is and what it isn't according to the policy and the law, how we prevent it, what we do when incidents are reported to us, how we determine whether incidents are bullying or something else, and what sorts of actions we take whether or not incidents are deemed confirmed cases of bullying. So before we jump into the procedures, I want to talk a little bit about what we do in terms of prevention. In each school, the greatest efforts are preventative in nature. You can see on the screen there are a number of things that are listed there, and I'm not going to read the screen to you, but I will say that at the Wilson School, they use a responsive classroom model. Community circles are used at the middle school 4 through 8. We have unified sports in middle and high school. We have best buddy clubs at the middle school and the high school. There are guidance classes that teach social skills and how to be a good human at the elementary level, K-5, and we have civil rights teams across our schools. One other important thing that we do is keep our ears to the ground on patterns that happen, and then shape preventative programming to match the needs. So for example, this year we've had some challenges with students spreading rumors at the middle school. I'm going to give you a scenario. I have a couple of scenarios for you this evening that hopefully will paint a picture for you of kind of what things look like. And so the first scenario is 2 students have a conflict with each other. They each talk to their respective friends about that conflict. Their friends start to take sides on the matter and talk amongst themselves about that conflict. The story becomes distorted in the process, like a game of telephone, and students say things that they're not sure of as though they're facts. And all of this results in hurt feelings at the center, the 2 students who it started with. And sometimes it can rise to the level of bullying. So next year we plan to offer guidance lessons specific to rumoring, the damage it can do interpersonally, and how easily it transitions into bullying. So all of these proactive strategies that you see on the screen are designed to promote healthy communities where students feel a sense of belonging, and that's the goal of prevention, is to really create a community and have kids feel like they belong. So what is bullying? Bullying, as defined by our policy, is also reflective of Maine state law. And so the key thing in our policy and in the law is that it can be written, it can be oral, electronic expression, or a physical act or gesture, or any combination of those things that results in students or a person feeling that they have either been physically harmed or their property has been damaged, or they have a reasonable fear of that. So that's sort of category number 1. Category number 2 is that it interferes with a student's rights by creating an intimidating or hostile education environment for that student, or interfering with the student's academic performance or ability to participate and benefit from the services, activities, and privileges provided by the school. So there's sort of 2 thresholds that we look at. It doesn't have to be both of those. It could be one or the other. And then it can be based on a student's actual or perceived characteristics. This is referring to harassment, bullying related to a person's real or perceived race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, familial status, religion, ancestry or national origin, or disability. And that is directly from our policy and also reflective of Maine state law. So we investigate bullying and harassment concurrently. If it hits the threshold of harassment, one of these protected groups, then we immediately transition into looking at it through the lens of our harassment policy. If it's not, then we investigate it through the bullying policy. So, some things that are important to know: it can happen once, it can be a pattern of behavior, and it often involves an imbalance of power. Some places where we see those imbalances in power are things like an age difference, when a much older student or even a few years older student is picking on a younger student. That gets our radar up. If kids are being iced out by their classmates, I'm taking away my friendship and every one of your friends with me, and now nobody's talking to you. And then if a student has a cognitive difference, those are things we look for. So what about cyberbullying? This is a big one and where we spend a lot of our time now. Cyberbullying is a form of bullying that occurs through the use of technology or other forms of electronic communication, and it adds a layer of complexity to investigations because of its permanence and far-reaching tentacles. So here's scenario number 2. A student takes a picture of a friend when they're doing something silly, goofy, they're just playing around, or maybe it's even a compromising picture, something that they don't want the world to see. The friend posts the picture to Snapchat because pictures disappear after they're viewed on Snapchat, right? A friend of the person who posted the picture thinks it's funny, so they take a screenshot of that picture and send it to their group chat with their friends, which includes 5 people. Those friends think it's funny and share it with their friends, and so on. They can do that because now it's permanent. There was a screenshot of it, so now it's permanent. And after the picture is spread far and wide, the student in the photo happens to receive it, is mortified, and confronts their friend who posted it. That friend apologizes and said, well, the photo isn't there anymore. Sorry, but I did it on Snapchat, right? But that damage is done. Things eventually settle down, and the photo is no longer a topic of discussion among the students, except 2 months later, the photo resurfaces because it's permanent. Whether or not this is cyberbullying is still to be determined, but that damage is done regardless. So some key takeaways that I want to leave you with are that technology really complicates things. Young adolescents, and I'm talking about middle school now, are by nature really impulsive, and they lack long-term planning skills, which are needed when deciding what to say and do on social media. Even adults sometimes are challenged by social media norms. Let's be real about that. And so it's to be expected that young people who are still developing will also be challenged by what's okay and what isn't on social media. I think I lost you. There we go. Okay. And so even when it's not exactly bullying, technology adds this layer of permanence. So what are the limits for the school? We have to respond to bullying when it happens on school grounds, at school-sponsored events, on school transportation. Those are absolutely our purview. But we also have to respond when it's outside of school if it fits the criteria in the law. And the criteria in the law is that piece about it's creating an environment where the student no longer feels like they can access their learning, the benefits of their education. So this is where the bullying investigations become really tricky. We have to assess whether the incident creates that hostile learning environment for the student or precludes them from accessing the benefits of their education. The law says it becomes the school's responsibility to respond to bullying outside of school when those incidents create that hostile learning environment for the student and interfere with their ability to benefit. So that's tricky to tease out and often really difficult to investigate, something that happened somewhere else. But we still do investigate those. Okay, so who can be a bully? Any of those people on the screen can be a bully. Who can be bullied? What I'm talking about this evening is really about a law that pertains to students. I think it's important to note that there is also a new law that addresses workplace bullying for staff, but I'm talking about, I'm sort of limiting my scope this evening because I could go on for days. I do want to pause for a moment and just say that bully is a big word. It's difficult to label that on anyone, and it should be used with care and caution. And so I prefer to frame it as bullying behavior. Not that child is a bully, but they had bullying behavior. So here's our data for the district. And that really tall section is several years combined. It's all of those years combined. You can see we only have 2022 for MSAD 51 listed on there because these are, that's current year. But is bullying a problem in our schools? I would say yes. Of course it is, as it is everywhere else. It's a problem everywhere. When we look at our data compared to other area school districts, we find that our incidents of bullying are consistent with the others. That doesn't mean that we're all set, we're good to go, don't need to worry about bullying in MSAD 51. Of course we do. It just means that bullying is always on our radar and always requires our attention. It is worth noting that the graph here illustrates some discrepancies across the districts that are really visible there. That the graph doesn't include incidents of peer conflict, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about peer conflict in a minute. But I think if it did, those rates would be much higher across the districts. Okay, so what? How do we respond to bullying? Again, this is a process. We investigate every report, we interview students, we interview staff who might have information, we gather and analyze any artifacts, for example, screenshots of technology. We inform parents and guardians of the investigation, we inform law enforcement, and it goes on. The reports can come from anybody. They can come from students, parents, staff, community members. They can be anonymous. We don't tell students who reported to us. However, students often tell each other that they were in the office talking to the principal or the assistant principal. And so we actively discourage that for the purposes of maintaining privacy, but kids are kids, and they do talk. It's a little difficult to control. Our goal in the investigation is to fully understand what happened from all angles. And that's done by piecing together threads from different witnesses to create a story of what happened, a reasonable story. This part is undeniably complicated because different people recall different things. Different people have different motives in sharing what they share. Sometimes students want to be viewed in the most positive way possible. They worry about disappointing you, their families. They worry about their relationships with their friends deteriorating. They worry about consequences. They worry about retaliation for reporting. They worry about us thinking less of them. And sometimes they're really not ready or able to take responsibility for their actions. There are some students who really aren't seeing anything wrong with their behavior. And it's important to note that younger children often don't recall the time frame or timeline of events or details. So it's challenging to piece together facts from incidents at the lower levels. So continuing on with the ways that we respond to bullying, we file a report once all of that process of interviewing is done. On the MSAD 51 bullying form, the investigator has to determine whether the reported incident is a substantiated case of bullying. In other words, did it meet the definition of bullying? Substantiated cases are reported to the state. That's what that graph showed, reported incidents. We do not include student names in that. It's just there was an incident. And parents and guardians are notified of the investigation results. That, for me, usually involves a phone call home and/or a letter that explains, here was my investigation, this is the finding, and here's why it's either bullying or not bullying. I think the most important thing to walk away with is that for a case to be substantiated as bullying, or harassment for that matter, it has to meet the criteria stated in the law. So you might be asking yourself, okay, all right, Mari, so those are the procedures for the school, but what really happens, right? So we have a range of responses, and those responses are broad, and administrators have discretion in how we utilize these things. I think more often than not, at the middle school, we're using restorative circles and guidance and social work support. These are done in consultation with other administrators and also with our mental health providers in our schools, depending on the nature and circumstances of the incident. Sometimes we have to impose more traditional disciplinary consequences in conjunction with restorative practices. So you see, there can be detentions, there can be suspensions. All of those things are on the table, but we always try, when we have to impose more traditional disciplinary measures, we're always trying to match that with support for both the student who is the alleged bully and also the student who's the alleged victim, or students. So what else do we need to know about bullying? Most of it happens during unstructured times or when kids are in large groups. That's a big point. So times might be in the hallways, at lunch, recess, before or after school. At the middle school, why does bullying behavior seem to increase in middle school? Well, if you think about it, they have a lot more unstructured time. They're moving through the hallways independently for the first time. Their parents also allow them to socialize with friends unsupervised outside of school with greater frequency than when they were younger. They also have greater access to technology. Most middle schoolers have phones. Many younger students also do, and they also access platforms that are technically not old enough to access them. You know, they lie about their age and have an Instagram account. Also, parents sometimes think they know what their kids are doing online, but sometimes they really don't. And so just a word of caution. I sometimes hear from parents, my child doesn't have social media or a phone, and I'll say, well, that we know of, right? Because even kids who follow their household rules have a friend who has social media sitting right next to them that they can look over their shoulder, or they're at their friend's house. And that's kind of normal. We want kids to have social lives. Some kids also have 2 social media accounts. So they have the one that mom and dad can see, and then they have the one that their friends can see. And stuff happens on the one that their friends can see. So I encourage parents to assume that their children are connected. Another layer is that there are more social opportunities in middle school with a broader array of classmates. They have clubs, they have sports that they can join at the middle level that they might not have had when they were younger. So greater freedom is really developmentally appropriate for middle schoolers. I really want to stress that. We don't need to tighten the reins and clamp down on middle schoolers. It's appropriate for them to have a little bit more freedom. And they're also figuring out how to be healthy, productive, well-adjusted humans. I like the word yet for this. They're not there yet. They're growing, and so our approach needs to be focused on that growth. Think back to when you were in middle school. Were you healthy, productive, well-adjusted humans yet? I certainly was not in middle school. And so all of these things converge to result in a great deal of peer conflict that happens in middle school naturally. But peer conflict, as hurtful as it can be, is not the same thing as bullying. Really hurtful, really hurtful, not underestimating how hurtful it can be, but it's not always bullying. Okay, so bully and victim, they're big words. Labels stay with children. Who they are now is not who they will become. Let's think about it for just a second. Does anybody really want their child to be named a bully or a victim? So families of both parties are understandably invested in their children. Parents of the alleged bully want us to understand that their child is learning and growing and not defined by one incident. Parents of the alleged victim want us to stop the behavior, of course, and often they want us to impose punishment on the alleged bully because their child's been hurt. So parents of the alleged victim often don't really understand how we might conclude that an incident is not bullying, but is rather pure conflict. So it creates this tension through that investigative process and coming to some conclusions. And because of that, because it's impossible to satisfy both parties, I personally choose to view each incident, whether I determine it as a confirmed case of bullying or not, as an opportunity for growth. I choose to focus on what each student needs, and I prioritize that. And I believe my colleagues have a similar mindset and approach, albeit through a different developmental lens. Often how we handle peer conflict, the strategies that we use both proactively and reactively when incidents occur are exactly the same as how we handle bullying. The name is the only thing that's different. So restorative circles, counseling, preventative education for students. Same things, different name. So what is not bullying? Setting boundaries with peers, choosing to end a friendship. This happens all the time in middle school. Middle schoolers are not fully developed humans yet, let's remember that, and they can be less skillful at ending relationships with their peers as an adult would be. So if you layer on technology, what you get is a text message saying, I don't want to be your friend anymore, or worse, blocking somebody on social media and they don't know why you've blocked them, or they've blocked you. And so while that certainly hurts, again, it may or may not rise to the level of bullying. It has to meet the definition. Another thing is peer conflict in the absence of a power difference. So peer conflict and disagreements among friends, two students not getting along is not considered bullying. Saying mean things to each other is certainly unkind, but it's also not bullying. So a few key takeaways that I hope you can leave tonight sort of having in the back of your mind. Bullying has to meet a specific legal definition that is articulated in our policy. We prioritize prevention. Even with that, there are still incidents of bullying. We investigate every allegation we get and sometimes find evidence of peer conflict instead of bullying. And whether it's determined to be bullying or peer conflict, many of the actions we take to support students and correct behavior are exactly the same or very similar. So does the board have any questions for me or my colleagues?
Thank you, Mari. I'll open it up to the board. Maybe start down with Anne, if you have anything at this moment, or you can pass off to Tom.
I would like to take a moment.
Sure.
I wish I had prepared some remarks because I have like a million things going through my mind right now. First of all, that was a really excellent, clear presentation, so thank you very much. Another thing I wanted to say before I get started was I represented the board on the safety committee this year, and I can't tell you how impressed I was with the depth of knowledge that the committee members brought to the table. I thought I knew a little bit about these issues, and it was absolutely nothing compared to what the folks on the committee had. So I was impressed and deeply appreciative of that. So I guess my concerns, I mean, I'm deeply concerned about bullying. But based on your presentation, it seems like it's so narrowly defined that if we look at bullying exclusively, or look at the bullying numbers, which, well, either way, it doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's happening in our schools. Because you talk about the peer conflict that exists, and a lot of that just doesn't meet the criteria of bullying. So it's helped reframe my thinking more from focusing on bullying activity to our broader school culture. And I think that's where there's a gap in my knowledge or my understanding of the issues that we're facing. To me, it would be helpful to have broader campus climate data. Like, do our students and parents feel safe in our schools? Do students feel comfortable bringing, I don't know if allegations is the right word, or just bringing any information about conflicts to their teachers and administrators? And those data may exist, I don't know. But I feel like having that type of information would provide us with a good baseline of how we're doing in terms of student safety and sense of belonging, and identify some areas where we could be making improvements. So I don't really have any questions, just that main observation, unless you can point to any existing data that would help us understand those things better.
I do have one thing that might be helpful. In grades 7 through 12, there's the main integrated youth health survey, and it does ask some of those questions. It's administered every 2 years. So we have data going back actually many years that looks at those trends over time. It's the same data that is reported every couple of years by our social workers, and they talk an awful lot about substance use related information. But another thing that they ask about is, do you have a trusted adult at your school? So you know, do you feel like you belong in your community? There are questions that do drill down to that information embedded in there.
That's great. And those are surveys administered every 2 years to all students, grades 7 through 12?
Yeah, well, all students who opt in, so there's a process for that. We send out notification to families within 2 weeks, I think it is, before the survey, and families do have the ability to opt their child out. And like any survey that's administered in schools, students are told up front, you don't have to participate in this. Some elect not to, and some choose to answer some questions, not all. But most of our students do participate.
Excellent. And one other observation related to this, and maybe this is a pie in the sky, like wish list kind of thing. I feel like it would be helpful to have maybe some qualitative data, just like focus groups talking to students about their concerns related to these issues, or even with I know that's complicated, but also maybe with teachers to see what they're observing. I feel like that might paint a more rich picture of what's happening. Thank you.
And do you want to go? Okay. I guess first, I can guess at some of this, but could you take us through briefly what responsive classroom is versus restorative practices and circles and community circles?
I can talk to you about restorative circles and community circles, and then I think Corey can come up and talk about responsive classroom, because that's more of a K-5 thing. There's not a lot of room for that type of programming at the middle level because our students move around a lot more. So Community circles are sort of a foundation that helps restorative circles be effective. It's not a great idea to throw kids into a restorative circle, which really focuses on incidents that were challenging, where someone was hurt. And so they're facilitated circles. Jason LaRiviere, our assistant principal, typically facilitates those restorative circles with our students. And you're bringing students together, and they're talking about what happened from everybody's point of view, who was harmed, what was the harm, and what are we going to do to make it right. And there are agreements that the students come to, and it works really, really well, especially for peer conflict, because each person is afforded an opportunity to be heard and to hear another person's truth. But what community circles do is lay the foundation for that to be effective, because if you bring people together to talk in a circle about something that is intensively emotional and challenging, that's not the best time to set norms around circles. So instead, during our advisories, we do circle prompts, and they're things like, what did you do over the weekend? What do you want to share? Students have the opportunity to pass, but it's a way to build community through advisory, so that when they then go and have a restorative circle, it feels normal, it feels typical, even though the topic is a little more intense. Corey?
So responsive classroom is more of the first tier, as we sort of group things into tier 1, which is for all of our students, and then tier 2, which is for some of our students, and then tier 3, which is just for a handful of students. And so at Mabel Wilson this year, we really focused on the responsive classroom for all of our teachers and all of our students. And the focus on that is having a morning meeting where kids learn what is the agenda for the day, what are some things that they're going to be learning, what are different ways that they can participate. It also really sets the tone for a positive classroom environment, and it gives students a lot of choice, and it focuses on, as a classroom, we are going to build a set of norms and expectations, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable, and we're going to go through that as a classroom. So responsive classroom, we actually had someone come in from responsive classroom to start the year, and we did a whole staff training, and it's proved to be actually a really, really wonderful thing from Mabel Wilson. And Tom, I actually do have some survey data from January where we reached out to all of our parents. And one of the questions was, does your child feel safe attending Mabel Wilson? And I think we had over 400 responses, and 98% said yes. Clearly, we want to work on the other 2%, and we have some additional conversations, but we do have some survey data, and we'll be sending that back out again in the spring. But so responsive classroom at Mabel Wilson is really what every student gets, and just a way to build positive culture and community within our schools.
And a kid, the tiers is kind of like a kid graduating from tier 1 to tier 2 is not a good thing, right?
It just is a level of support. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means they need some additional support.
Yeah, okay. And the restorative type approach doesn't work at the younger ages, or why is that not done?
So we have dabbled in the restorative type approach. I think only a handful of our staff have actually been officially trained in that approach. We do, similar to the peer conflict versus bullying, we do a lot of restorative work. We just don't necessarily do it in the restorative circle manner. We have our social workers, myself, Sally, guidance. We all sit down with kids and we talk through the problem. We're just not officially, I don't feel comfortable saying we officially do the restorative circle piece yet, but I think it is something that we hope to do in the near future.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of sitting the kids face to face and making them work it out. There's great value in one of them feeling terribly guilty about an event and them just sort of working it out.
Yeah, we do that. We just don't call it the restorative. And we don't make kids feel guilty, I should be clear, but yeah.
Okay. I would second what Tom says about data. Obviously, we can't go back in time, or probably not too far, but I think, you know, being able to see more than just a bullying event versus no bullying event, and even drilling down, you know, how many peer conflicts there were, and what was the verdict when things, you know, didn't rise to the level of bullying, and just capturing that data, like things, events that were once versus multiple times, you know, that sort of data would be good to try to build on. I think it's hard for us to sit up here sometimes and hear the negative stories and really sort of sort through them and not have anything to go through. Of course, we want to trust our administrators, but it's very hard not having data and not knowing the whole story. So I appreciate this this whole presentation. Further, I guess I would just ask again, like what Tom said, is what can we do better? You know, I don't think that over time kids have gotten meaner. You know, I grew up and kids were mean, and I certainly had my times as well. I don't think that's changed, but the things that have changed is probably the cyber effect. And then I sort of worry about, coupled with the cyber effect, if our kids are prepared well enough to just deal with conflict. I think we jump to the conclusion now that everything is bullying, and that's maybe not the right approach for our kids. Like, sometimes other kids are just mean, and they'll get over it, and you should get over it as well. So I guess my question is, are we doing enough, and what can we do better? And especially at like the middle school level and high school level, I wonder if that should include like curriculum that is mandatory, like cyber ethics, that sort of thing, where we talk about what's appropriate, and, you know, not only for the kids around you and how you treat others, but, you know, God forbid a picture is taken that haunts you for the next 40 or 50 years. So focusing on that stuff and just making them understand the weight of what they are doing. So I'd be in favor of that. That's it.
Thank you. The question I have is, and I'll use an example that we're all aware of, was back in the fall when there was a communication board that was destroyed on campus. And how do administrators find the balance between the independent conversations that happen with the students that are involved and the parents that are involved and any staff members and the greater community in the school? So I think that was an example that a lot of people knew about. It was very easy to see that it was damaged. It was very easy to see that it was a certain group of people that were being bullied against. So I feel like that fell into your criteria that you presented us tonight. So how do you as an administrator balance when to talk about this to the community of your students and your staff, as opposed to keeping it more confidential and on a case-by-case situation?
Yeah, so that incident, that actually was an easy one. That needed to be discussed as a whole school. And so we had community circles in our advisory that were tailored to that issue and had prompts to talk about what happened, who was impacted, what was the impact, who's hurt by it. And each person in the advisory has an opportunity to speak to those prompts. So it was essentially a restorative circle in a community circle environment. And because we had a foundation of community circles, we were able to do that with the same prompts. Our social worker and counselors did a great job of drafting prompts for everyone to use. We doubled up advisories, so no one adult would be responsible for a group of kids to talk about heavy stuff. And then ran the community circles. And it was interesting because I think it really did have an impact on students. This is very anecdotal, but just last week I had a student reference the sign. Said, that was like, this thing was like the sign earlier this year. So they are making connections when we do those things, and that's an example of, yep, that was a reaction. Didn't see that coming. You know, I really didn't see the sign being kicked out of the stand coming. I probably should have, but I didn't. And so, yes, we reacted in that case. But it was that reaction was also proactive for the future. So, does that answer your question, Tyler?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just also more of a statement that that is a very hard line to find, and that I appreciate that you're saying that there's a proactive element there that students are carrying with them as they continue on through the year. I just continue to struggle with where that line is and how broad of these conversations we need to be having around school culture, because this is all connected.
It is, and I just also want to say that, you know, in terms of when do we keep things a little bit more under wraps, when I would be outing an individual.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
I don't ever want to, you know, display an 11 to 14-year-old to the public. That doesn't feel right to me, because again, they're still growing and developing and becoming.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for putting this together. While this is my second to last meeting here, I hope that you do this type of thing and talk about this more frequently to the board and to the public, because I think you made a compelling argument. You know, you had slides in there talking about the challenges that you have as an administrator, and I know that your colleagues share this as well. I think I'm the second oldest person up here, barely. Bullying looks different today than it did when we were kids. It didn't follow people home in the same way. It wasn't in their hands in the same way. But when you talk about the challenges as an administrator, needing to understand where something began and where it is, I would imagine that that's pretty difficult for you and your colleagues.
It can be very difficult to get to the bottom of, so to get to the root, you know, especially when technology is involved. And especially when incidents are occurring outside of school. It can be very challenging to dig down into that and get the truest picture of what has happened and then pass judgment on that. I think we do the best we can, knowing that we're flawed, right? We are not perfect, and the investigation is limited by any number of factors, not the least of which is what people want to share with us.
Right.
So we have to use good judgment, and I try to err on the side, again, of not being so reactionary to an incident that I'm missing the mark on what is fair, reasonable, appropriate, and will help kids grow.
Yeah. You know, Jason touched on this a second ago, but the fact that you put up that, I mean, just that simple piece of bullying versus pure conflict, and that thought of different ways to solve for that. And it's not for us to solve for it up here, it's for you to solve for this. But that, I mean, the reality is, any of us that work in different roles, managing productive conflict is the number one thing that we run into with adult learners within almost every industry. And they spend so much time trying to help grown-ups to understand what their preferences are when things get tough. And that is one of those things that you could be looking at as to understand what the issue is, bullying or conflict. And I really like that you drew that out. You ever run into resistance from the parents of a child who's been accused of bullying?
Absolutely.
How do you manage that?
Present as many facts as I can. And that's part of what I was saying a moment ago, of not wanting to go too far down a road that I might not feel confident about. So I don't make sweeping judgments. And I do that by design because, again, bully is really a big word. And so I don't throw it around lightly. And I don't want to be on the side of the game board where I'm accusing students of things that I don't feel pretty confident happened. So I try to gather as many facts as I can and corroborate stories.
Well, and that's helpful to understand, and I'm sure it looks different in the other buildings, but it's easy for all of us up here to nod our head in enthusiastic agreement with you. And it's easy for any parent who doesn't have a child who is going through something difficult to be in agreement. So I understand the burden, or I think that I understand the burden that you're going through. The last thing that I wanted to share is when you talked about restorative justice, and that came up to this board a number of times over the years. And I remember, again, as somebody that's been out of school for a while, that it always felt soft to me. And you hear that in the community. And then a member of our community sent me a book on restorative justice, and he led one of the organizations in town as executive director. It's a phenomenal read for any parent, and if you can make that available, because restorative justice is not soft. Nothing about it is soft, and I think that it's that type of thing that will help young learners to prepare themselves well. Enough of my diatribe.
Peter, do you have anything?
Well, I don't have a lot, much intelligent to add to it. I guess I just see the news, read the reports, and the profile seems to be with so many of these folks, not only the shooters, but also the near incidents and everything, and the profile is loner, bullied in school. So I think to the extent that you folks are trying to get them in middle school and set them on the right course of action is probably a good thing. Jason has mentioned that, you know, people have always been mean. I mean, we, growing up, you had those situations. I think another thing he said, that so much of the children's activities today are organized, so that they're organized Little League, organized soccer, organized this and that, and you never have the chance in the neighborhood to kind of learn how to sort out conflict and everything, but it's just the nature of what our society is. We can't go back. But it is an issue that these folks don't have the experience in kind of sorting things out for themselves. And obviously the one that for my generation that is so scary and we don't really have an answer is just the whole social media thing. It's just something. I mean, I see it with, you know, the grandkids, and God knows what they're doing when their parents aren't around. But I know you're doing the best you can, but what's going on is just scary, and it's beyond my pay grade. But you're trying, and I hope the parents at home will download this presentation so that they can get some kind of an idea that we're trying, but it's a team effort. We can't expect the school to deal with it. It's the home, it's the community, and God knows if these social media companies will ever get involved, but I'm not taking that to the bank, and thank you.
I echo a lot what Kevin said. You guys are creating a safe environment for the kids to make these mistakes. They're not going to learn as an adult if they're not making the mistakes now in middle school. And to be able to do that peer conflict, I appreciate that. Is this a presentation that you give the children? Because I feel like that bullying word gets thrown out real quick and the flags go up. So is there some kind of education that you give middle schoolers that this is what peer conflict is, this is what bullying is, And how do they respond to that? Do they understand the difference, or is it?
So the answer is yes. We do. We do. One of the examples that I would give you is there's, with Cow Island, our guidance counselors provide a lesson to all of the students called the oops versus the ouch. And some of you may have heard that from your kids going through. So an oops is you said something, you kind of stepped in it, which we all do, right? And the other person had an ouch from that. It was hurtful. And how you handle that moment of, whoa, that was an ouch, really matters. Because you can say, oh, I was just kidding, right? Just kidding absolves you from any responsibility for the thing that just came out of your mouth. So we talk with kids about that. And, what is a different option that you might choose to, accept responsibility that what you said, whether you intended it to be hurtful or not, kind of was. We talk about the intent of the action or behavior versus the impact. So those are all things that are sort of captured over their 3 years with us. And yet there's more that we can do, for sure.
Is there something that you educate the parents in regards to, I just learned a whole lot right now with your presentation, and it'd be helpful to give to the parents for them to understand the difference. Kids are going to have this peer conflict. That's how they learn.
Right.
And there's bullying, and that's a whole different category. So I think might be in this community a lot of parents that may not be educated on the difference between the two. And anything that happens to your own child, you're like, they've been bullied, but it is labeling. And I'm just curious if there's something that we can give back to the parents and the community to educate them a little bit more.
So I learned by doing, and I put this presentation together at your request. I have not done this presentation with parents before, but I'm more than happy to do that sort of thing. And I think there are elements of this that I have learned in creating this presentation and consulting with my administrative colleagues on how they handle things at their levels that I think has been missing from the dialogue, for sure. And that piece about bullying versus peer conflict is huge. And I believe it should be articulated really clearly and precisely so that folks have a better understanding of what bullying is and what it isn't. It's just a really narrow definition of the law, but that doesn't mean that somebody wasn't hurt.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
I also learned by doing, Mari, and doing phenomenally. Thank you for this presentation. You're been up there a while, and so I'm going to make you stand here longer. Sorry. I just really appreciate the work that's been put into this. I know about Responsive Classroom. I have 2 kids who've gone through Mabel Wilson, well aware of it. My kids have both benefited from it, so appreciate that. Learned all about the Restorative Circles. My middle schooler talked to me all about that, especially Tyler mentioned the board incident, that horrible incident, and it really impacted my daughter going through the Restorative Circles. It was a really important moment for her. And just to see the emotion from her teachers about that issue, it was really important, and it really impacted her. And I think that's an incredibly important thing. And it gets at what the point you were making, Kevin, about restorative justice, of how that can be really powerful. In fact, the opposite of weakness. And so I have a really annoying question because I want to ask you, just as a person who has expertise in this issue. Mental health is on the decline, especially in kids, but across all age groups in our country, but again, especially in kids, and we're here talking about children. Multiple factors play into that, right? I have my own strong held theories about where they derive, but it's a crisis at this point, mental health. And schools, and especially our school, are a central part of our community. And I agree with the point that the mental health crisis requires community response, but as a centralized portion of the community, are we equipped to deal with this crisis? And how could our district look at this potentially differently or better to help deal with this crisis? And again, I'm asking you not in terms of specific things we're doing, but as just a person with expertise in this issue, if you have ideas or thoughts.
Well, I guess I would start by saying I don't claim to have expertise in the realm of mental health. I'm not a clinician, so...
Certainly on child development, you do.
Sure, okay. I don't view myself as an expert on that matter. However, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree that there's been an uptick in mental health and behavioral challenges in the past few years. And I think we can talk all day long about what the causes are, right? And speculate about those things. I have my own opinions about it too. Or we can get down to the business of trying to do things to support kids. And I guess from my point of view, it's about creating a place of belonging as best we can. It's a priority for me personally, but I think Grayling Middle School faculty and staff collectively, that our students feel a sense of belonging in our school. That when they walk through the door, somebody knows them, like really knows them and cares about them, and they know that that person exists. And it might not be every person in the building feels that way about them, right? But I know I've got one person. That's my person. Are we 100% successful? Clearly not, right? Do we strive for being 100% successful with that? Absolutely. Every day that's a goal, that every kid feels a sense of belonging in our school. And I think that's how we get to that place of addressing some of the pieces of the mental health crisis, along with social workers, mental health providers in our community, partnering with parents. All of that comes together, but it starts with a sense of belonging, I think.
I think that's a great point, and it's one that we should learn also community-wide. And so outside of these walls, these four walls of each of these buildings, how do we create community for everyone in these two towns? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Don't worry, I don't have any questions.
Avery, did you want to say anything at all?
Yeah.
Oh,
have a whole
okay, I thought you were
prepared thing.
passing on. Just wanted to check. Thought that was a little strange.
Yeah. I think it was like 3 years ago I was in this very middle school. And from that experience, I know that you guys have a very hard job. You made an excellent point. What is bullying? And I think that bullying can be really tricky to identify and address. And I know it can be hard to hear about all these different incidents that happened around the schools, around the district. And it's even harder when it's your own kid and you have skin in the game. But kids are like a pack of wolves. They pick on the weak, and eradicating bullying, especially in the middle school, is essentially impossible. Obviously, we want to get rid of bullying, and any interaction that makes students feel unsafe in school is unacceptable. And social media doesn't make that any easier. But on some level, minor interpersonal conflict resolution is important for character development, and that's a hard balance. All you can ask for is for someone to try their best, and you all are doing a much better job than I could ever do, so thank you.
Thank you, Avery. And I wanted to loop back to you and see if you had anything.
Yeah, I guess I just having a hard time still kind of wrapping my head around my thoughts, because all of this is so complicated. I think while on one hand, sure, data and tracking is useful, and we always have to recognize that the data is going to be insufficient because there's going to be incidents that happen that aren't making it to teachers and administration, and we just need to recognize that. We need, I think, to make sure that as a district, we are not looking the other way when statements are being made, that when statements are being made, that we are swiftly especially if it's statements that are harming a protected class, that we swiftly say that that is not okay and it's not acceptable. It can be dealt with in various ways individually with the people, and I think one thing that we need to look at is how the vicarious harm, though, is carrying over to other students, to other staff, to other families who are part of those protected classes. Mari, I appreciated when I reached out to you to kind of get a sense of how things were at the middle school, and how you were very honest about the incident, an anti-Semitic incident that had happened from a visiting school, and how you had reached out to the staff to let them know that what had happened, that you wanted them to hear it from you. And I want to make sure that that's what happens all the time. And I don't have confidence that it is right now. I don't have confidence that things aren't happening on buses, on athletic fields, on stages, in hallways. And I think it's our duty to ask these questions and to push everyone to do better, to give everyone feedback and that opportunity to do better. And I think it's unfortunate that we're in the situation that we are now. And it doesn't matter if we're the #1 school in the state for high school or middle school when we have this happening. It doesn't matter.
Thank you, Ann. Jason?
Sorry, I know I already have my turn. This is an important one. So maybe this is a question more for Jeff. Just how do we keep track of repeat events? To Peter's point, when there's the individual that, you know, goes from school to school, and every year this piles on, and then that kid is on the news. Like, how do we capture that?
Well, I think in our district, we're a small enough district that our staff, obviously, we transition students from each school to each school in our district, and students that need more support, they get more support, and there's those conversations between our schools. I think it's a little more difficult, obviously, in larger districts where that may not be the case, but I think here, our social workers, our guidance counselors, our administrators, you know, we're small and we talk to one another. We're making sure those supports are there. But at the same time, we're trying, you know, we try to give kids a clean slate. We have a lot of teachers that say, I don't want to know anything about the kids you know, we can't really do that. But I don't want to know a lot of information right now until I have the student for a couple weeks and I can start to get to know the students that I have. So I think there's a balance there between those two things.
I'm sure it's a fine line to walk. I think recognizing those repeat events and capturing them or picking up on them would be important. Again, I just want to make sure that we're doing enough, and I hope some curriculum comes out of this, not only that focuses on more kindness that you've talked about and the preventative side of things, but almost more importantly to me is how preparing kids, helping kids deal with unkindness. That's maybe my greater concern that we're lacking these days. And I'll offer to everybody, as we talk about the cyber everything that's making our world worse, there's a book by Jacob Ward called The Loop that talks about this and how we are the product, if you will, to Facebook and these companies, and it's really sort of enlightening how they view us and how important it is that we just stay on our devices to them. So, that's it. Sorry.
Thank you. I think, I can't remember who said it up here, but I hope that this is an annual conversation that we can have. And I think, just as you had said, Mari, that there was a lot that you kind of gathered while putting this together. And so I think the more times we have these conversations, the more we grow. And I just hope that this isn't a one-off opportunity to have these conversations. And I think the PTO and Foundation 51 are all great opportunities for educating our parents, because this is we got to put our arms around this. The culture doesn't change just inside of a classroom. So it's really our community's responsibility as well. Thank you so much, Mari.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
Thank you.
So this somewhat leads into our next presentation from Superintendent Porter on school safety.
Yeah, first I just want to thank Mari for an amazing presentation. I think it was really clear. And it really is helpful. I'd like to thank the leadership team as well. They wrestle with these issues routinely and making sure that we've, trying to strike that balance that we have been talking about. So I think these are important conversations. Tonight, we also have a complimentary presentation, so it's kind of a dual. There's a lot of information coming tonight. We feel it's extremely important and very timely. I had a couple of things I just wanted to say about the bullying presentation. We have done in the past, and we have not done them since COVID began. I like to blame COVID, but no longer. I can't blame it. We've done stakeholder surveys in the past, and we have attitudinal data from students, parents, and from staff. And those surveys were very, very important. We used to provide those results once a year to the board. We used to post them for everyone, and we did them each year diligently for years and years. And when COVID came around, we did stop that practice back in 2020. And it's in this presentation as well, but we plan to resume these stakeholder surveys in the fall. I think they're really important. They give us a window into what people are thinking, our students, our staff, and our parents. We do have a digital citizenship curriculum in our district. Mr. Van Kuren and the technology leadership team came up with that curriculum probably 3 or 4 years ago that we use in our district, and I certainly think it's important, but it probably doesn't do everything because things change so much with digital citizenship. We have to keep up with it. And the final thing I'll just say about bullying is I agree with a lot of the comments that were made that used to be, Peter, there's Peter. I was like, where's Peter? I lived in a neighborhood of about a dozen other guys and 2 girls, and the 2 girls moved away after 2 years of living there, probably because of the rest of us. But we used to manage our conflicts. We were outdoors all the time. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really was the truth. It was just a few miles from here, and we used to manage all kinds of conflicts in the woods, on the street, playing ball, whatever it was. We're constantly, getting on each other's nerves and getting after each other, but then figuring it out and stuff like that. And I think that is missing today, and it just is part of the world we live in. Lots of things are organized, but I think a lot of it. My point was that a lot of that stuff that back in the 80s I used to deal with on my own, and my parents never got involved in that stuff, and certainly not the school. Today, it's become more formal, and it is part of the school process that never was that way back in the 80s. And that's just, I'm not saying it's good or bad, just sign of the times. And I think, that's why we're talking about this, and this is why it is such a hot topic. The other hot topic, obviously, is school safety, and these are things that we really shouldn't even have to talk about, but we have to. Over the last 20 years in the United States, things have changed quite a bit. I'll just start very briefly. Back after Sandy Hook, I was down in Connecticut less than 2 weeks. It was a scheduled trip to visit some friends just a few miles from Newtown, Connecticut, less than 2 weeks. I think it was 10 days after the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I did not want to go down there, but I found myself going down there. And I took some pictures so I would not forget how I felt. That's the reason. And these pictures tell really only a tiny bit of the story, but the immense grief, the way that changed that town. And those are things that should not happen in our country. And unfortunately, they do too often now, and it's become too routine. So I think anytime we talk about these things and bring them out in the open, we are a little bit better for it. This has been in our strategic plan, which has been extended for a couple of years due to the pandemic, but still is in our strategic plan around school safety. Why do we talk about school safety? Because students can't learn and teachers cannot teach unless schools are safe. And the only piece that we really had for actionable items in the last strategic plan, which is woefully inadequate now, is completing a threat and vulnerability assessment through Homeland Security. in finding security gaps. And we did half of that, which was to actually follow through in the assessment about a month before COVID happened. We finished that. It was February of that year, 2020. And that report went to the board, and we began the process of itemizing areas that we were going to make actionable through the security committee. And then you know what happened next. The U.S. Secret Service, there is a couple books that have been written by a former agent and a researcher now with the U.S. Secret Service. And he was specifically talking about metal detectors. This could apply to any hardening of a school or public place. But his quote is, "My concern is if schools are putting a lot of time and effort into what's called hardening, making it harder for intruders to get in or out, you may not actually be doing threat assessment." And threat assessment, behavioral threat assessment, has become really a leading and important piece in talking about school safety. So the U.S. Department of Justice has talked about, in a very comprehensive report that was published 2 years ago in 2020, talked about looking at school safety from a variety of angles, but two in particular. This presentation and the bullying presentation, by the way, will be clipped out of this board meeting and sent out to all parents in the district, as well as staff members in our district. And our high school students often ask to make sure that we don't forget them, and we always include them in these. But these presentations will be going out this week for people, and they include links in there. Department of Justice has identified two different types. None of this is should be news to us. Physical safety. Then Mari was talking a lot about emotional safety and talking about bullying. You can see these areas that are addressed, looking at areas that are of critical importance to keeping our schools safe. And I won't read through those right this moment. But I do want to talk about, first of all, physical safety and what do we have in place. We do have a safety and security committee. We've had one probably for 7 years now in our district, and there was a lull before that, and there was a committee that was similar to that for years and years as well. So this district has a long-standing practice of having a group of people come together. District and school emergency plans with current updates are being looked at right now. We've really had a lot of work done by the Safety and Security Committee this year. Those updates are in progress, and we hope to finish that work midway through next school year and get it to the board. We lock our facilities, been doing it for years and years. Remote building access controls, we can actually turn off, or we can lock all of our exterior doors by just one switch in our district if we needed to, and we have done that on occasions where it's not controlled by necessarily the school. We override the controls, and we can do that in security situations, and we have done that. We also have constant monitoring during the school day, not after the school day, but during the school day is the period of most importance, although I will be making a recommendation later that you'll see. We have an on-site full-time school resource officer who is a police officer with the Cumberland Police Department. This has, again, been years and years of a relationship with the Cumberland PD. We have internal and external video surveillance around our campus in different areas. As you know, you've approved the ALICE approach. I will be sending out a lot of information about ALICE this Thursday in the district newsletter, including a link that is a tutorial made for parents, actually, to explain ALICE and what it is and what it is not. And we'll be implementing that in September of this year. We have silent alarms in certain areas of our district. Obviously, I can't reveal where. But they are directly tied to police dispatch. We've had those alarms for probably 5 years now in place. We have done a comprehensive threat and vulnerability assessment, obviously, which our strategic plan called for back in 2019-20. We have an emergency communication mass notification tool, which we send out for different reasons, but obviously when there is an actual emergency as well. Lockdowns and mass evacuation drills, we've conducted those. Lockdowns we typically do once a year. That's required by state law. And this summer we are reconfiguring the entire main office at the Wilson School to be more in line with what Homeland Security suggested. and with security. That of our offices in our district, that is the one that needs the most attention right now in terms of security. And then our Mabel Wilson School, we have modulars in the largest modular unit. I'm sorry, we have bathrooms in the largest modular unit. We'll be putting bathrooms in at the Wilson School in the other modulars this summer, and those bathrooms are for the purpose of not having young children walking in between the modulars and the main building. So those are some of the current things. I'd like to ask the police chief, Chief Rumsey, Cumberland PD, if you wouldn't mind talking for a couple minutes. Chief knows I was going to ask him. This is not a surprise. There is a letter that the chief sent a couple of days ago that he and the department have signed. But I also just wanted to ask the chief if you have some other things that you'd like to say. We've been communicating quite a bit in the last few weeks, and I appreciate everything the Cumberland Police Department has been doing for the SAD.
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent Porter, and thank you to the members of the school board for having me in for a couple of minutes. Tonight's actually my 6th anniversary of my hire date as your police chief in the town of Cumberland, and I'm not sure I've actually officially been here and addressed the board before, so it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And I knew that Superintendent Porter was going to go over a lot of the work that we've done collaboratively to try and enhance school safety, and I have no interest in repeating any of that. But, you know, I just want to mention to you that I think following the events down in Texas, that school safety has been sort of to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I was really happy to hear that the DOJ has started to undertake a thorough investigation and eventually will release a report that will sort of give us the blow-by-blow of what happened down there. And I'll be one of the first people to read it to glean any lessons that might be able to be learned about what happened there, so that we can do our best to close any gaps that may exist. And, you know, there may come a time where it's appropriate for somebody to criticize the actions of law enforcement down there. I don't know. I'm sure that it's not now, and I'm sure it's not here, and I'm sure it's not me that's going to be critical. I think what is important, though, is for everyone to know about our efforts that have been happening, that are ongoing now, and that will continue in the future, so that we can that the efforts that we've undertaken to try to make sure that the school campus is as safe as it can be, and to reassure members of the board, faculty, staff, parents, and any students that might be listening of our, you know, commitment to responding to campus decisively and taking action to end any threat to students or faculty or staff. I know that you've all met our school resource officer. This is just about the end of Amy's first year, and in the short time she's been with us, I can't tell you how amazing she's been to work with, and I hope that the school administrators and the guidance counselors and the social workers would agree. She's very nuanced and very quick to react in the face of an apparent threat to the school, working to establish relationships with students, and she just has my full faith and confidence in her abilities, and it's a pleasure to work with her. I'm proud to be a member of the School Safety Committee and think that we've done some great work. Got real hard for a little while during COVID, but I'm glad that we are back to getting the work done. I think that Superintendent and I have fielded a bunch of questions from parents over the past couple of weeks about, you know, what is the school's preparedness? What is the police department's preparedness? And I think it's important for everyone to understand that my staff is trained and that we are equipped with the very best tools of the trade for us to respond to any threat to the school. I'm not going to go into great detail about exactly what we have, because I don't want to inform somebody who might be out there on the off chance that they have any ill intent toward our campus about what our capabilities are and are not. But just take me at my word that my town manager, my town council have been very supportive of us having the tools that we need to respond here if necessary to end an active threat to the campus. That's all well and good, I think. But at the end of the day, you can have all the tools that you need and you can have all the training that you want. And if you're not prepared to do the right thing at the right time, then it's all for naught. And so after the superintendent and I fielded a bunch of these questions from parents and concerns, and you could just hear sort of the anxiety in their voices as they try to answer the questions of, is my child safe to go to the school? Is the police department ready to do what they need to do if there's ever a threat to my child's safety? and trying to figure out how I could communicate to the entire community exactly what our commitment is to you. I wrote this letter, shared it with some of the members of my agency who helped me make it better, and then was very proud that everybody signed off on it. I know that it's up there on the screen, and maybe many of you have read it, but I think you need to hear the words from my voice. So I'm just going to briefly read it to you, and then I was going to provide a copy to you, Madam Chair, but I understand you probably already have one, so I'm happy to give you this copy if you want. Dear members of the MSAD 51 community, we, the undersigned members of the Cumberland Police Department, grieve with you over the recent tragedy in Uvalde, Texas. We appreciate the anxiety and concern that you may be feeling as you send your children, our most precious community members, to school. Perhaps you wonder if your police department is trained, equipped, prepared, and resolved to defeat an active assailant on our campus. Most of us at the police department are parents. Many of us are siblings. All of us were once children and students. We know in our hearts that if we had experienced the terror of an armed intruder intent on harming us, our teachers, and our classmates, we would have hoped for one thing: a brave, unflinching, uniformed police officer to rush in and save us. We are united and unwavering in our commitment to take any measure necessary, including the sacrifice of our lives, to protect your children and your children's teachers. We are trained to respond immediately and move decisively toward any threat. We are prepared to neutralize any such threat using physical force, including lethal force. We are equipped with modern tools to make entry into any school, even if it has been barricaded to deny us entry. We have trained and will continue to train with our public safety partners at the Cumberland Fire Department to assist with the delivery of life-saving treatments to injured students, faculty, and staff during an incident. News of mass casualty incidents around the nation rightfully spark fear and uncertainty in parents, faculty, staff, and even students. Please know for us, these concerns are ever present. We are proud of the collaborative and proactive relationship that we maintain with MSAD 51 administration regarding school safety and pre-incident planning. We consider how and where we will enter buildings in an emergency and ensure our equipment is accessible and in working order. In the coming months, we will seek to learn any lessons available from Texas. We will continue training, planning, and preparing. We will enhance at any opportunity our skills and our equipment. The solemn vow we make to you today will never change. We pledge that without hesitation, we will act. Very respectfully, Amy Owen, School Resource Officer, Antonio Ridge, Sergeant, Scott Hendy, Sergeant, Jacob LaChance, Sergeant, Benjamin Burns, Detective, Matthew Merriman, Patrol Officer, Joseph Burke, Patrol Officer, Ryan Pinchon, Patrol Officer, Nicholas Descanio, Patrol Officer, Christopher Schofield, Patrol Officer, Charles Rumsey, Chief of Police. I knew when I put that letter in front of my staff that it was kind of a tricky situation. If one of them chose not to sign it, it would look pretty weird, me delivering you a letter with 10 out of 11 signatures or 9 out of 11 signatures, but I can tell you that there was no hesitation. Some of them thought the letter was powerful, some of them were excited to sign it, some of them, typical sort of wry cop humor. Well, isn't this what we're supposed to do? Why do we have to sign a letter? This is what we signed on. We're all ready to do it. But nobody hesitated to sign the letter. And I really hope that hearing those words is a source of comfort to the staff, to the faculty, and especially to the parents that send their children to this campus every day. So I hope that's received in the spirit and the intention that it's offered. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have of me this evening.
Thank you, Chief. I don't know if we want to open it up. Jeff, your presentation continues, correct?
Yeah, but I know the chief has limited time, so if there's any questions, this was a good time. I told him we'd squeeze him right in when he comes in, so.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm happy to open it up to the board if anybody has any questions or comments.
I'll just say thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
For the love of whatever God anybody believes in, I hope you never have to do any of this. But
so do I. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I actually don't have a copy of the letter, so having a copy of it sent to the board would be wonderful.
Sure, I can, if it's okay for me to approach, I can drop it off to.
Of course,
give
yeah,
it to
you can leave it on
Okay.
the.
All right, thank you very much, folks. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
And this letter also will be in the presentation that goes out to the school community as well. We'll be including it right in the presentation as it is, but it'd be nice to have hardcover. I'd also just like to reiterate, Chief Rumsey and also Chief Small from the Fire Department have been integral members for years and years of the Safety and Security Committee for MSAD 51. They are basically standing members of that group and offer an amazing amount of support, advice, information, and really, I have to say the chief has been very instrumental in helping us with the ALICE program and getting that program into our district. So the other area that the Department of Justice obviously identified as emotional security, and this ties in very much with Mari's presentation on bullying prevention and talking about bullying, but obviously taking this even further. We have a dedicated mental health and risk assessment specialist. We're one of the few in the state. This was something that Julie Olson had pushed for a few years ago, and it has been an amazing resource. And this person has been an amazing resource, Eric Brown, and really checking on assessments of students that have some risk behavior of some kind, and then working with students directly who are higher at risk, working with Eric in combination with social workers and counselors. It's in a position that, honestly, we could have 10 Erics. I mean, it's just an amazing resource for our district. We also have 6 social workers and 8 school counselors in our schools. Proportionally, that is, we'll always love to have more, but proportionally, that is a good number of our staff, mental health staff to our district. We never can have enough. But these people are amazing resources for our students each and every day. We have, for probably now 3 years or so, maybe 4, had a universal screener for mental health that we administer 3 times a year, K through 12. It's called the Student Risk Screening Scale, or SRSS. And this is an important scale. If there's anything that we notice about a student on that scale, there's follow-up and parents are contacted, et cetera. But it's just a good kind of dipstick 3 times a year, just like we do with any sort of response to intervention academically. We also have a mental health response to intervention that we've implemented as part of the strategic plan. We have a full-time PhD level school psychologist on our staff. A lot of districts do not. They have part-time or they contract out. This is a person that Dr. Blanchette has been on our staff for 2 or 3 years now, and he's a full-time psychologist with our school district. Incredibly helpful, and he has a team of psych examiners that work with him, as well as another psychologist. We also have a district-wide mental health resource plan, and Dr. Blanchette actually was the one with his team that came up with this plan. This was part of the strategic priority for this year, and I won't click on the link now, but will be available to parents. We use this plan. We've had numerous programs over the years that we continue with. A couple were put on hold because of, I won't say it, the pandemic, but are coming back or are back already. And these are the Anti-Defamation League, ADL. We've had a long-standing relationship. Challenge Day at the high school is one that we have not had for 3 years, partly because they have not been programming for 3 years. So we're hoping that they can return next year with us. Ripple Effect is a middle-level program. Again, we took a little bit of time off with the pandemic, but brought it back this year partially, and then hopefully in the fall we'll be back the way it has been. Civil rights teams, these are just some of the things that we do. You heard about the advisory program and also the advisory programs at the middle and high school levels, Restorative Justice. We've participated with Youth Court for years and years as well. Suicide prevention is a state law, but we train all of our staff, every single one of our staff, coaches, all the way, everybody gets trained. And then there's a refresh training every 5 years for suicide prevention. We obviously have, including Eric Brown and Molly Costable, who's our Assistant Food Service Director, are members of the Regional Mental Health Committee, which is Cumberland, North Yarmouth, and SAD 51. This is something that was just started literally this weekend, or maybe Friday. We have a mini course that all students in social studies classes, obviously our senior classes graduated, but our high school students will be participating in a mini mini course within their social studies classes around anti-Semitic response training. And that's something that the social studies department at the high school implemented just, again, late last week, this weekend. So thank you to the social studies department for taking that on. The upstander intervention skills for anti-Semitism is taught through our health class at the high school as well, and as part of a Department of Education project. So those are some of the things that currently we're doing. Recommendations around physical safety. I'm not going to go through all of these recommendations because a lot of them actually will go to the Finance and Facilities Committee. I believe on the 16th of this month they have a joint meeting that we've scheduled. Some of these require funding, and other commitment could be capital expenses. These things are not necessarily in our general operating budget, might require capital monies or leftover monies at the end of the year for some of these projects. Some of these are in the works or have been in the works, but they've stalled for various reasons, sometimes money or other priorities. But this is a list of things that have come up repeatedly in some cases. Some are new. One I'd like to point out, I think the chief has left, but the chief has applied for a grant called the COPS grant, and that's actually through the U.S. Department of Justice for an additional school resource officer. It will be grant funded through the Cumberland Police Department. And if successful, that there will be a second SRO that we could have. It obviously would require the approval of the board to do that. But these are things that we don't necessarily want to perseverate on and talk about, but we live in a world where these things are critically important. Some of these things have been brought to us by staff, like the second item, classroom doors being locked from the inside. I've heard that repeatedly from our staff members, that they would have to physically go out they do have to physically go out in the hallway, lock their door with a key. It's kind of an antiquated lock that we've got in some of our doors in our district, not all of them, but some of them. I'm talking about interior doors, not exterior doors. So how can we fix that? And there are remedies. In fact, there's school safety design pieces now that are not that expensive that we can now participate in. Other districts in our area have started doing things like that. So these are the things that I'll be bringing to the Finance and Facilities Committee. One thing I will point out, and this is kind of a big one, is the fifth one from the bottom, an intercom phone system upgrade at the high school. This has been on our capital list for upgrades, been on budget list as well, but it's a very expensive item, and we've often put it off, and sometimes it doesn't even make it to the board level for budget processing because it's such a large expense. However, we're at a point where we can no longer ignore this. When we did a hold in place 2 weeks ago at the high school, the system failed. There were several areas of our school, and I'll just say it, I'm not proud of this. We had several areas in our high school that did not receive the message. That is not safe. We have to, and I'm bringing this again to facilities and finance, there's some items that I think we're going to have to use capital money and just go ahead and make those decisions. At least that's my recommendation. Because we've got to have schools that are up to speed on some of these areas. So those recommendations will be coming forward. You'll hear more about it. Recommendations around emotional safety is also, a lot of these are things that we've talked about. So resuming things like Challenge Day that have been not on the plate. That program, by the way, I talk about Challenge Day a lot. It's an amazing program at the high school level. It's not a panacea. It does not fix everything, but it does help students. All students who are sophomores were going through this. It does create awareness around differences between people and accepting and appreciating differences among people and promoting a sense of belonging. It has good success. The chief has also been working with us, as well as Peter Scott from the high school, Don Gray at the high school, and a few others have been participating in these calls with Sandy Hook Promise. They are inundated. They are very busy. However, they did give us priority to give us a free anonymous Say Something app in the fall of 2022. We're on their short list to get one. We do not have to pay for it. It is part of an anonymous reporting system that's been promoted by the police department and by members of our school administration, social workers, guidance counselors. And there's a whole system you put into place on how to tier this kind of approach. So if somebody needed to report something, somebody's threatening to harm themselves or others, but they don't feel comfortable coming forward, this would be another mechanism that we would be able to sift through with help. Our administrators have been receiving some training on bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, Title IX. A lot of these laws have changed just in the last 2 years, state and federal. So Drummond and Woodson has been doing some training with our administrators and will continue that training. These are things that we have to continuously keep up to date on with these changing laws and make sure our policies are also up to date. And then the last part of this, recommendations for emotional safety, really hinges on the equity plan that we've been talking about that hasn't been developed yet. We're talking about an equity policy first. But these are things that have come up repeatedly around what could be in an equity plan. And this equity plan obviously would be getting public engagement. But looking at equity from a school lens and not as much from the district lens, that's where we know the meat of equity really belongs. Looking at staff training on equity and culture and climate. Lawrence Alexander is scheduled in for 2 different trainings with staff in October, one on a professional development day and then a follow-up workshop with staff to dig deeper if they would like to. Expanding curriculum and programs that promote belonging and anti-bullying, student engagement. We have talked at length about bringing someone in as well to do student engagement tables or discussions with students around that, especially focused on race, anti-Semitism, and gender identity and expression. And I've already gotten some staff ask me, why are you limiting, just today, why would you limit this to these 3 areas? Because I did put some information out to one of our school staffs on some of this. And the answer is, it's not limited to those 3 things. Those are just things that we would emphasize. But certainly, there's many other areas of equity that it's really about belonging and culture and school climate and helping all people feel like they belong. Mari talked about this. This is so important, just making sure we have to keep at this all the time, making sure that there's at least one adult in every child's life at the school. We know the importance of that at home, but at school too. And making sure that there is somebody that they feel understands them and that they can connect with. There's various ways of doing that, and principals have different strategies that they use in making sure that happens. I mentioned the stakeholder surveys. That's really valuable information that we get, and we haven't had that information for 3 years, and I will provide the board the previous results that we have. We have all that data, and it would be, I think, helpful just to see what we've had in the past. Hiring practices that promote diverse workforce, increasing access to curricular materials and practices. These are all things that we've talked about as part of these discussions. Communication protocols, how do we respond to equity-related incidents? What are things that, how do we respond? I think those are, things that we've touched on. Where's the balance? Continue partnering with PTO and Foundation 51. They're amazing partners for the district to provide parent training on equity. They jointly helped us with the last training. They're terrific resources in so many ways. And then communication around physical and emotional safety and finding that balance between, and Mari talked about this earlier, I know this came up, so I won't reiterate too much of it, but where's that public notification and then where's the student privacy? The generalized versus isolated safety concerns and kind of looking at what is a generalized safety concern and then what is one that's more isolated and really limited to a few people and is not something that's generalized. And just remembering that not every safety incident is public information. In fact, I would say the vast majority actually is not, for 100 reasons, notwithstanding security. Those are important reasons. We confer with the police on those things. Trusting the administration for navigating the balance. Our administrators at the school level have the most information about these things and really are adept at figuring out what that balance is. They're the ones that truly I defer to on these things to find the right balance and strike that. And resisting making monuments out of moments. I saw this the other day in something I was reading, and I thought it was a good reminder that we just have to put things in perspective sometimes. Sometimes things are really serious, and we had a very serious incident in this district over the last month. And there are certain times that we have to do that, and there's certain other times when we shouldn't. Emphasizing school-level communication over district level. The school is the closest place to a lot of these things, and that's where a lot of communication really should be happening. And finally, next steps. I think these are immediate next steps in developing the strategic priority draft for the board over the summer. Certainly be focusing on physical and emotional safety. Again, those have been strategic priorities, but maybe not in the same light or vein that I'm presenting, and that Mari did her presentation as well, but incorporating the bullying piece and bullying prevention and that emotional safety as well, making sure we're continuing to really focus on that as priorities. Facilities and Finance Committee, I mentioned this, will be hopefully looking at those recommendations June 16th and making any recommendations from that group to the board if they choose to. The Safety Committee, completing emergency plan upgrades, that will be again over the next school year. ALICE training is already scheduled for August 2022, the 3 days before students return. This is late August. We've already put, working with Don Gray at the high school, Officer Owen, and Chief Rumsey on that training. Equity Administrator training, we have that with Lawrence Alexander with our leadership team later this month after school gets out. Equity staff training in October, as I mentioned earlier, with Lawrence Alexander and the Equity Steering Committee and leadership team helping to draft up an equity plan this coming school year as part of a strategic priority for public engagement and eventual board approval. So those are just some of the things hopefully coming up, and if the board agrees to those priorities. And I know it's been a lot of information. I appreciate people listening. We are planning to splice out these presentations because we think they're of such critical importance and interest to so many people that we'll be splicing these presentations out and sending them out to, again, our stakeholders in our school community so that they can watch them and provide the materials that we've had tonight. We just feel like these are two very important topics facing our schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm sure the board has a lot to, well, digest a little bit and then maybe to respond to. I think I'll just share kind of what's in my head at this moment is that it's unfortunate that we had to have a school shooting to get to this conversation. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't go back after major events in our country to make sure that we're doing the right things. It's unfortunate that we have such a long list of facilities needs. When we did just apply for renovation funds, specifically around some of these things, it's hard to digest that we need all of these things. And it's hard to digest that if that didn't happen in Texas, would we have known this? And would we be doing the work to make sure that we are checking all of these really important boxes? I'm glad to see that equity is part of a leading conversation around emotional and social emotional well-being for our students. I'm concerned about the capacity for that, if that is going to be something that we are going to focus on more, which it seems like that's the recommendation. I hope that we have someone on staff that is able to find some capacity for that, because as of now, it's been a committee that's been at a volunteer level, and it's hard to move a lot of this forward in that capacity. The other thing I'd like to share is that, you know, one of the things both Jeff and Peter said that, you know, when we were kids or growing up, we would play outside and we would figure out our problems outside. That's a really simple solution. We should give our kids more time outside and be free a little bit more during the day. We have built these plans and these lists about how to deal with school shootings instead of how to give our kids more time to be kids. And it's really hard. And this isn't anybody's fault, it's just the reality of the world that we're living in right now. It's hard to find the balance of, instead of responding to school shootings, how are we looking at it differently? And if that didn't happen in Texas, what would we be talking about tonight? I worry about that. And then lastly, we always are asked to trust our administrators, and I think we've done a really good job. I know that's something that we've been asked to do over and over and over and over again, especially over these past 2 years, and some really challenging things. And I just want to express from a board's point of view that that trust also comes from understanding, and that many times we are asked to trust something that we have no information on. And that's a very hard relationship to uphold in these type of conversations. So I want to make sure that if there are questions being asked by the board that are different than what we're normally asking, it's because we're trying to understand. And that it's not about ego or trust, it's about making sure that we're doing all this stuff and that we don't have to wait for the next school shooting to make sure we're checking the boxes. This stuff is really hard. I'm having a hard time digesting it all. So I will open it up to the rest of the board if anyone else has had time to digest and articulate. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Tyler. Amen on all of it, especially on the point around giving our kids a bit more freedom and time outside. If we could build that in, I think that's an outside the box way of thinking, even though it's something you've been calling for a while. I want to just make one point, and then I have a couple quick questions. The point, the multiple incidents of anti-Semitism, it's a gut punch, especially maybe I'm the only Jewish member of the board here, maybe not, doesn't matter. But it's not surprising. It's happened for a long time. When I was in school, there was a group of kids who decided to catalog all the Jews in the school. Yep, these things, they happen, but they're disgusting, and they perpetuate hate, they perpetuate injury, they perpetuate othering. It's tied to our broader community. It's tied to social media, anti-Semitism, white supremacy, organized misogyny. They're all sadly on the rise. They currently offer belonging through digital organizing, and they directly target young males. And so it's coming right in our door. And it's to be frank, it's putting it back to what we're talking about, it's why we really need to do more work on equity and inclusion. One of the main reasons. The policy we're looking at tonight is only the first step. We need to continue doing more. I really appreciate that equity is built in here. Also want to note that, I hear what you're saying, Jeff, about not making an incident a monument, but sometimes making an incident a monument is how we can isolate and diminish it, because otherwise we're letting that virus of bigotry fester quietly, and that lets it spread. And we can't do that. Sometimes it may seem over the top, but especially when it comes to bigotry, rarely is it a bad thing to say, that's wrong, can't happen. Rarely. I can't think of a time where it would be like, well, maybe we shouldn't say anything. No, we should always say something. Always. Always. So now a couple quick questions. So specifically, I would love just a little bit more on what the anti-Semitic response training is.
You mean at the high school?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was something that the social studies department put together a lesson plan for the department for all social studies classes. And actually, thank you, Mr. Curry.
Well, it was in response to
Yes.
anti-Semitic events at the high school. Let's be very clear about that. It's not just because it's a good thing to do. It's reactive at the moment.
It is a response too, but it is, I think it's a very important piece that the social studies department saw a need and then took some action. So, Jason, do you want to talk about it?
Thanks, yeah, I do. My neighbor across the hallway, Rich Taylor, was the recipient of one of these anti-Semitic comments and has been the backbone of our high school's response to it. I cannot praise Rich Taylor enough about this. So what we have done, and I can't claim credit for it, I came into the process late, I was in some other meetings, what members of the social studies department and some other departments did was to get together and plan a unit that lasts for about 35 to 40 minutes, going over Pastor Niemöller's famous poem about first they came for the communists, but I wasn't one, so I said nothing. Then they came for the socialists, but I wasn't one, so I didn't speak up. And so on until at the end, then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So we have talked to our students in our social studies classes for a few minutes about, in general terms, about the school community here at Greeley and about how there's a lot to be proud of, but there are some areas where members of our own community are being made to feel as the other and blamed for things. And that not until we include all and not until we convince our peers that these kind of statements are not entertaining, that their shock value is not truly humorous, that they are hate speech and intended to divide and intended to sublimate some to the others. Not until we understand that and not until we communicate that to our peers as students can we have a community that's the one that we really desire. So that's been something that we've been doing as a department, and a lot of other departments have been creative and supportive in working with us in that. And again, all praise to Richard Taylor, my neighbor, for spearheading this and being a fantastic leader of this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. You're very good at deflecting praise, but you should take some yourself. A question, though, is that something that can then start to be, you're sharing it within the high school, but then it's also, those learnings could go down to GMS as well.
We would absolutely be happy to share that, but from the sounds of it, a lot of what happened with the message board and the restorative circles at the elementary and at the middle school coming up to us will probably create a new breed of empathetic students who, I hope, I pray, might not need quite as much redirection as the group that we have now. So thank you, Mari, and thank you for all of the other building administrators and teachers who are working at all the levels across the district.
I concur. One final question, just about the a specific question. Do we functionally need a second SRO? I actually think we do need one, but do we need two? Could that staff capacity, would it be better served by additional social work, school psychologists, facility upgrades? The reasoning behind it. Do we need a second SRO?
Well, I think, my answer, this is just me, I believe we do. I believe we do. We have 2,100 students, and I believe that having just one SRO for 2,100 students is just inadequate in today's age. And our social worker is more than just being a physical deterrent. In fact, I would say that's only a tiny part of the job. Our SRO is talking with students, meeting with students, and more on a, hey, let's talk, informal, tell me your problems. And so a lot of, and it's in our MOU as well, that they are part of our school community, that they are partnering with us, and they truly are acting almost as a school official. That's the legal role, really, for an SRO. Yes, they're a sworn police officer, but they're acting as a school official in their capacity as an SRO. Now, if something happens, they're flipping to a police officer immediately. But that's kind of the distinction that's been made legally. So I think of it the same way, and I know that Officer Owen, every time I go by her office, she's got kids, she's talking to kids, and it's more conversational. It's not, you did something wrong. It's, hey, tell me about your weekend or whatever. So there's a lot of that goes on.
Anybody else at this end of the, Avery?
Yeah. I think that having an SRO is really important, not only for security, but for building a positive relationship between the community and the police department. And I don't know that a second police officer at the high school would be necessary. I think just a second general one to support maybe the elementary, middle school, and occasionally high school. I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you. Vanessa?
A repeating theme that I just keep on hearing, whether it's the equity or the safety of the children, is how we're educating them. And I just feel like we'd be amiss to not say that the teachers and the administration are doing a really good job trying to keep up with the times and educating our children in the best possible avenue that they have in front of them. And I just feel like there's a lot of pressure we're putting on the teachers with regards to that, and we should look reflective and say, what are we teaching them at home to bring that to the school as a parent? The other thing, I do think we do need a second SRO at the high school, because if an incident was to happen and they took over that one SRO, what are we left with?
Right, and I think in our community, as we all know, we're fortunate that a mile away,
Right.
or a little over a mile away, is the police department. So I think there's a lot of comfort there that we have that capacity to have someone here very, very fast.
Right.
That's not the case in a lot of communities, so.
That's it.
Thank you. Peter, do you have anything to share?
Nothing.
Kevin?
I guess from my perspective, there weren't any surprises on any of the things that you showed us, Jeff, and I think, you know, I think that there's some work that we can do in that discussion next week around finances and facilities, and see which of those can be moved forward. And but in terms of everything else up there, I think that nearly everything that's up there has been discussed as a board at one point or another. And I think that it's incumbent upon having additional conversations. To Michael's point, there can be no excuse when somebody says something or acts inappropriately. I like the work that's being done as a result of that. I think that proactive is always better, and there's been a number of things that I remember over time from Parent University, where folks came in from ADL, folks came in to do many of the things that Vanessa was talking about, in helping parents to have difficult conversations at home that will cascade into the classroom. And then the last thing that I would like to say, building on Peter and Jeff's comment about spending more time outside, a lot of the conflict that any of us did was made easier because from dawn to dusk we were outside without something strapped in our hand that allowed us to access the world. So the world that we were dealing with, the world that we were experiencing, the conflict that we were experiencing was right in front of us with people in our community. Now, I don't think that we can spin that backwards and replicate that for anybody unless they go off to camp without handheld devices. But many of these things that we're talking about being outside are best served in the community as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Jason?
I think we're talking about this because of the effects of the first presentation, really. I think we have to talk about this because of the deficiencies, I guess, in mental health, or this slide here, emotional safety. Bullying is all part of that, and somehow we need to find a way to unwind and actively combat the effects of the modern world, I guess, that we live in. I would second Tyler's comments on facilities improvement and planning for a better long-range plan, 1 year out, 2 years out, 5 years out, depreciating various parts of our assets over time so that we're looking further out and planning for that better. I would support a second SRO, and I think somebody commented that, you know, it's building that relationship. Avery said, build that relationship, and that's important, especially at the young ages. And I sort of agree with Tyler also about, trusting in these difficult situations. Being on this board, we get calls and the finger is pointed at us just as much as some of the administration. So when we ask hard questions, maybe not right at that moment, but it's good to have a little hand-holding and help us walk through and help us understand the processes that we might not know everything. I guess that's it.
Thank you, Tom.
I do have a couple of questions, but before I do that, Jason, you beat me to it. I wanted to echo your comments, Tyler, from earlier about trust. I appreciate that tonight we have an opportunity to talk about these important issues as a board and to ask questions, and hopefully moving forward, we'll have more opportunities when it's not such a reactive space. I think we could benefit from that. Also regarding the second SRO, if we want to be forward thinking, hopefully we will have a school on a different campus in North Yarmouth. So having a second SRO to split the difference between those two, like our Cumberland campus and in North Yarmouth, could be beneficial down the road. Something to think about now. And then my questions have to do with the glaring need that you pointed out, Jeff, around the phone system. What is the price tag on that? And in the meantime, are there things that we could be doing that would help bridge that gap until it comes into place?
So we have been, it's a very, I don't even want to tell you the age of the phone system because I can't tell you, but it goes back decades. And we've been piecing together as the high school was added onto, the phone system was added onto as well from its original state. So I don't want to give a price that I'm not sure or confident in public, but I've seen as a price, and some of it incorporates including other parts of phone systems as well, but the price could be as high as $300,000.
And things that we can do in the meantime until that happens.
We've spliced everything together. We really can't splice more. We've asked the phone company. They've run out of literally parts in some of our phone system. It's been literally on our capital list for as long as I've been here and well before that. It's something that, it's because the price is a lot and we've made do. We've made it work. We've kept fixing it. I think Don Foster knows and Dirk Van Keur know how to fix things and get them working as much as they can, but it's an old system.
Thank you.
Can I just make a side comment regarding the phone system? I'm looking at some proposals that were presented to the Finance Committee, and I was never, and this is naive on my part, I was never presented the phone system as a safety and security item. And I think that if we had seen that differently, especially as how it's being presented today, we may have looked at it differently. And so to me, it was more of an internal, and again, this is my not fully understanding, but I think if we could better understand the need for that, maybe that would have been in this budget. And I don't think we knew that this was a safety issue, or at least that was not how it was presented in my memory.
Yeah, and this is the first time that I've heard that the phone system, or the PA system, I should say, which is off of our phone system, failed in certain areas of our school. Maybe it's failed before, but this is the first time that I have known that we've had serious issues with our phone system and PA system not working the way it's supposed to.
Okay, thank you. Ann?
Thank you for this. You know, I look forward to seeing how we can do better. All of this is just so much and so upsetting for me as a board member. I feel like I can't do my job adequately and that I don't have enough information. It breaks my heart that a staff member was harmed and is the one organizing programming to try and prevent that harm. This shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, and I apologize that this information is all coming to you at this time. We obviously don't like to do two weighty conversations in one evening. However, with the timing of, obviously, the school safety, we put that front and center back out there. I think that the message I want to send is that these are things that we've been working on for years. It's not all of a sudden we thought of school safety or we thought of equity, or we thought of mental health, or we've been working on things like ADL partnership, which has been going on for 15 or 20 years in our district. These are things that a lot of these things are just kind of long-standing pieces in our district, and we're putting it in one place, along with some recommendations of things that, you know, I think what's alarming to me as both an educator and a parent is that, and I think, you know, and say what you want, but the President of the United States made a good statement the night that Uvalde, Texas happened. You know, when are we going to stop allowing this to happen? When are we going to take the power back as a country? And I'm not politicizing this. I'm just saying this is school safety, and it shouldn't be this stark. It shouldn't be this hard, but it is, and that's where we're at. And we have to respond in some way. It's irresponsible not to. And we're doing what these recommendations are not all the recommendations probably that could be. I'm sure there's others, but these are the ones that make sense for our district. And it is a lot, and I know that it's a lot of information in one night. But it's irresponsible for me to think we'd go into the summer without having the endorsement of the board and approval to move on some of the items that are going to require financial assistance as well. We need to do that.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for the engagement around these conversations. This is tough stuff. So we'll move on to, do I pronounce it as a word or is it an acronym? ESSA? Thank you. Report by Susie Robbins.
So I apologize. I'm not going to, you all have a copy of my presentation. I'm not going to show it due to the length of time, and my topic doesn't really fit into this evening. But as your person who writes your ESSA grant, every Student Succeed Act grant for federal funds, I'm obligated to tell you every year how we spend those funds and how we propose to spend them next year. So according to the presentation, if you look at it, we get just about the same amount every year in 3 different titles, Title I, Title II, and then Title IV. Next year, we're projected to get around $113,000, which is $3,000 more than last year. What we do with those funds is, you probably heard Sally talk a lot about this, but we combine those funds so that we can work on early intervention at the K through 3 level for some of our struggling students. So we partially fund 2 of the literacy leaders, or the 2 literacy leaders that are at MIW with those funds. And we're just proposing that we take next year's funds and continue on in the same way. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? Okay. Thank you, Susie. All right, I will now open up the podium for public comment related to the various presentations that we just heard, specifically to bullying and/or school safety. Is there anyone that has any comments that they would like to share?
Hi, I'm Leanne Candora. I live at Christopher Road in North Yarmouth. I want to start by thanking you for tonight's presentations, especially to Mari for your leadership at the middle school level. I'm here tonight to express my concern about the multiple anti-Semitic incidents that have happened either at the high school as part of high school sanctioned events. And I also want to thank Mike Williams for sharing your experience tonight. I'm also disappointed there has been little or no public acknowledgement of these incidents to parents in the community, and I've only heard of them from conversations with those in our community who have been impacted. I applaud the faculty of the high school for deciding that these anti-Semitic incidences were important enough of an issue that they came together in the last few weeks of school to build a specific lesson plan to address anti-Semitism. I'm glad that our teachers are leading, but I am concerned that our administration is failing to do so. Greeley Middle School students are selected to participate in Anti-Defamation League training that prepares them to report incidences of anti-Semitism, bias, bigotry, or hate. Because naming and calling out hate is the first step to stopping it. Why isn't our administration doing the same? I recognize that we are in the last few weeks of a very long year, and that everyone is ready to call this year over. But it's not. And if we are not naming these acts publicly as anti-Semitism, it can create a culture that normalizes and tolerates these acts. We can appropriately inform our community of these incidents without sacrificing student privacy. Letting parents and teachers know the state of our community helps us to support these efforts and allows us to improve our community. This is why the equity work in our district is important. I've spoken out multiple times, and I appreciate the outline shared tonight of the Equity and Belonging Plan, and I plan to participate. We as parents are not pushing it as a political agenda. We are pushing it as a recognition that here, even in our beautiful Little Maine community, with the highest rated middle school and high school in the state, that we must do better by our students, by our teachers, and by every individual in our community who has been harmed by a culture that accepts hate speech and threats of violence against protected classes, and that this is not okay or accepted. That's the message that is communicated when I don't hear from the administration that this is an issue. Our administration, from Superintendent Porter to our high school principals and vice principals, are all well-intentioned people. But I hope that they can use these events as a chance to learn, to grow, and to do better going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Hello again. Tim Valenti, North Yarmouth, Fieldstone Drive. So thank you for this tonight. This was really informative. Jeff's been really good in responding to me as well. I'm glad that we closed the loop on a couple of newsletters before that you would follow up with some more data on this. So this is really helpful. I know my son feels very safe at school. I know and believe that we foster a safe environment. And stuff like this helps. And so I want to push that we do this more often than annually. I think we can do this, biannually at least. I think this is a space where you don't get credit when things go well, and you get blame when things don't. And so I really want to honor that for the people that have participated in this. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and for the vast majority of incidents at school, they're resolved very well. And I also to Leanne's point a little bit, I really want to encourage you to include the families in these conversations, to create a more visible culture to teachers and family as well, so we can have collaborative conversations and problem solve. Because we hand our kids off to you, off to the staff, and the kids come back to us, and we have to have a similar message with very similar language so that our kids kind of have a fluid experience. So in part of that, I've really advocated that we increase the type of data that we are collecting. I don't know what systems that we use. I think Mabel I. Wilson actually tracks it in Google Forms. And I've also heard that teachers have limited visibility into that. I really want to encourage us to use data more effectively to guide these conversations, and to use systems that don't necessarily promote a demerit culture, but so that we can become more proactive in following these instances, and we can be more informed as parents to prevent anything in the future to comes up to bullying. So part of that is I want to offer my support as a parent and an expert in this as well. So if there's any system design, any recommended systems, this is something that I do for my job. I'm happy to provide that support and consult to the board. And lastly, you guys talked about outdoor programs or being outdoors. I really want to encourage investments in after-school programs. There's a lot of research that says that after-school programs reduce incidences, reduce bullying, and increase academic performance. And so when we look at after-school programs and investing in them, really consider that. So I'll leave with this. I'd love for the community to know what current systems we're using that we're tracking this type of data on, what data is actually available. I appreciate what we have tonight. I hope we have more than that. But if not, let's hopefully get to that, because it would really help answer a lot more and inform a lot more strategies. So thank you. And thanks for tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right, we will now move into our superintendent's report for the evening, or for this meeting. Thank you to our administrators for the long day, rather.
So I'm going to keep my report brief. I realize it's late. I just want to point out that the last week, despite everything, the presentations tonight, and putting some things right in the spotlight here, but I also want to put in the spotlight a very festive previous week in our district with the class of 2022. This actually is a photo of the class of 2022 with the class of 1972. We had members of the class of 1972 show up at candlelight service on Friday evening and were recognized for their 50th anniversary. So those are some of the folks there. It was really nice to have. It was actually a very touching few moments there as some words were read about the class of 1972. And you can tell I'm getting messages from Hootsuite while I'm presenting. Apologize for that. Here's some photos of graduation yesterday. It was an amazing graduation. The weather was perfect. The kids were festive. People were really happy. This was just after they had turned their tassels and were officially graduated. Great pictures. Photo right before. Obviously, got to have ticker tape. This is on social media. We have an annual, it's been going on for a few years now, senior parade. These are students at the high school here. We had students go through all of our schools. This is just outside of Mabel Wilson School, and then in the middle school all the way through. So we had students cheering. This doesn't do justice. The amount of enthusiasm and energy and excitement and hugs and high fives and every other thing you can think of. I mean, I was standing right here, obviously taking the photo, and it really doesn't tell the story, but it was really touching. Every year, it's amazing to see, these students who are about to leave kind of go back and see where they used to be, and to be greeted by kids who will someday be wearing those robes. So I think it's just kind of a great moment. Kind of relish. Charlie Safian, it was an Olympian in our district, Special Olympian in our district, really had won quite a few awards, and he is off to the USA Games, and it's such a huge honor to be in that and to be on their cover for the USA Games for Special Olympics. So there's Charlie, and he'll be participating in the swimming. Although he did a lot of other things besides swimming when he was here, basketball, all that stuff. So, another thing that we're really excited about that is a new addition to the high school is a grant from Foundation 51. And actually Madison was involved in building this. She's not here tonight, of course. She's graduated. But we had some students and one of our staff members involved in building the screen house. Thank you to Foundation 51 for footing the bill for getting it to us. And they already have some big plans from what I've been told. And at the primary school, we've a lot of block prints and creations in art class. Just one example of just kind of moments, try to capture moments that are going on in our district. Staff will send us different moments that are going on. There's Mr. Curry, obviously, and his team, before they went off, just as they were going off to DC for the congressional debate. And then we had some friends at the district office. We don't always get small friends at our office, so it's fun to have them come over, and that's why everybody's smiling. The PTO and friends of the PTO came over and gave us cupcakes one day, along with all the staff in the district. So that made us all really excited and happy. But thank you to the PTO for celebrating all of our staff just a couple of weeks ago. And then we had the climate action team at the high school, and the outing club was assisted by the faculties, which is a band of teachers at the high school. They've been around for years, and they actually helped throw off this event and raise some money, which is exciting. So that's my report for the evening.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, we will now move into committee reports. Kevin for finance.
So 2 quick things. There will be an upcoming meeting between facilities and finance. I think it's the 16th. The 14th is date critical for both communities. I know the town of North Yarmouth historically has very high in-person count, so important to come out and vote. Ideally vote in the affirmative. It is a responsible budget. We'd appreciate the support from both communities.
Thank you. Anne, policy.
Yes, we have 2 policies that are coming to the board for first read tonight. The first is policy ACA. And I just wanted to share that the policy committee really strived to provide clear communication and opportunity for community feedback on this policy. And I feel that overall we were very successful getting it out in various newsletters, mentioned it here at the board and on other levels. And just as a recap, this version of the policy was drafted by our legal counsel. It was reviewed and approved by the Equity Leadership Steering Committee before being reviewed and approved by the policy committee. The policy committee did make a few minor edits in red regarding board review and annual reporting out by the superintendent. As for policy ACAF, this is a new policy for the district as a result in change in state statute. Representatives from the teachers union joined us in review of this policy, and we had a very long, thoughtful discussion about this policy, making sure that it did the best to cover all of our stakeholders. Ultimately, we approved the draft language from legal counsel, which you have today, though we will keep following it as the policy has been introduced to see if it's working as expected.
Great, thank you. And so we should, as a board, expect that these 2 will be coming back for a second read on the 22nd? Yes. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Facilities, Peter.
Well, Jeff has already covered that we will be reviewing the different elements of the safety recommendations. I think we'll be able to put some numbers on it, and hopefully we can reach some kind of consensus to bring that to the board. The other development is that it looks like that enough of the environmental things, we've still got a few things open, but it looks like we're far enough down the road on that Oak Point is going to present a rough concept plan to the committee, and also Scott is going to have some preliminary numbers. So stay tuned. We're going to wait and see, and hopefully no more salamanders raise their ugly heads. And we might be able to proceed. So stay tuned.
Thank you. I don't believe we have anybody here from curriculum, so communications, Mike?
I don't think we have anything to report tonight.
Okay. Equity Leadership Committee met last week, I believe, and is planning to do maybe one last meeting for the year, but seeing if people are available and if there's energy there to make that happen. Student reports, Avery?
Yeah. Yesterday, the class of 2022 successfully graduated high school. although Madison thinks she's too cool to show up anymore and tell us about it. I think everyone is pretty happy.
Thank you, Avery. You are officially our senior rep. now. You should be quite proud. Ad hoc committee reports, I don't believe we have any. So we will then move into our items for action. We moved the first item of action up earlier. We do have an item here that is approval of a variety of new hires and professional positions, and if it's okay with the board, I would ask that we would vote them all as one, and there is a recommended motion there.
So moved.
Okay?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Jeff, do you want to say what these are? Is there anything of note here?
No, I'm just saying, this is hiring season. It's typical for us to have a lot of, this is actually when we typically have not new positions, but new staff in front of the board that we're asking for approval. So we have a lot of positions at this point. We do have some retirements, we had some resignations, and we have some new positions. That's kind of a mix of positions that you're looking at that are on there. So some very, very good applicants and excellent hires, candidates. Been really impressed. I do all this last interviews for any teaching position in our district.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor? Great, thank you. All right, and then a motion for the second reading of policy BED.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any questions or discussion here? Jason?
Can you speak to, I know you reviewed this with the attorneys, like, one thing we had discussed at the last meeting, and I'm disappointed, I guess, that the consensus here was that this needed review, but then the same exact document is coming back to us. And we didn't get specifics on the things that were brought up.
So I guess I'm a little confused, because, I mean, I know I did send out the email, and so what it was, the added changes that we had attempted to make, legal counsel reviewed it and felt that it was making the policy even more restrictive.
So it would have been nice, I guess, to hear on the specific points what their points or issues were on that for me. So the thing that that's one of the things that was brought up was the need for this if we don't need the people for a quorum, I guess. And then my other concern is sort of some sort of like circuit breaker in this for, you know, repeat offenses or whatever. If somebody is not here over and over, there's no verbiage in here to sort of, for the chair or anybody to sort of bring up an issue with that.
Well, as a reminder, we have policy BE board meetings, which outlines the expected attendance of board members, which would be able to be used for that.
And I believe Ann sent out an email explaining what the lawyer's response was.
It was very
Outline.
broad. It didn't speak to the specifics. That would be nice, I guess, if we have individual concerns, specific concerns, that those individual concerns are spoken to.
I would suggest next time that you get that email, you should respond and ask to make sure that they're confirmed before we get to the board meeting. A lot of work is done in our committees, and it's really hard to rehash that work every time we come to the board. So I would encourage anyone that has questions about committee work to ask all of those questions so that we can reiterate any answers here.
And I would say that maybe it's a more efficient process for one person to communicate to 9 those things that they went through and answer those questions if they're asking for my vote.
Sure.
I mean, I felt that outlining that the lawyer said that it was making the policy more restrictive covered it. So I guess my apologies for making that assumption. I mean, I don't know what else to say that.
Let's just speak to the specifics of the individual items, I guess. To me, attorneys often make things, they're a tool in the toolbox. They're not the carpenter. So
We had a long discussion about this, the policy committee did.
So similar to this board wants certain assurances and sort of a little bit of hand-holding and understanding from Jeff at times. I think it's also reasonable that the subcommittees, when they're asking for certain things of the board, give a reasonable amount of background and explanation to the process that they went through.
I thought that I did. I hear that it wasn't, so duly noted.
Okay. So that was our discussion. All in favor?
Who was the motion? I'm sorry, I missed the motion.
I made the motion and second.
Okay, thank you.
And before we adjourn, I missed, because there were so many new hires, item C. I'm looking for a motion to approve administrative positions.
You want to take those separately?
Sure, if you'd like to read them individually.
I move that we approve appointing Jacqueline Hayes to the position of GHS Assistant Principal for Student Services as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Any discussion or questions here? Okay, all in favor? Great. And the following motion?
I'll move to approve appointing Mallory Orzechowski to the position of MIW Assistant Principal as recommended by the superintendent. My apologies to Mallory.
Second.
And any discussion here? Okay, all in favor? Great, thank you.
Please don't include my apology in the motion.
I think you did pretty well.
All right, and then final item for action to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Great, thank you.